beneath the shifting sands of the Sahara lies a civilization that still whispers to us across millennia. Egypt, a land of towering pyramids, silent temples, and monuments that defy time itself. We marvel at what remains, but what about what's missing? There are mysteries here that no historian has unraveled, no archaeologist has explained. Why do certain hieroglyphs depict objects that seem centuries ahead of their time? What secrets are buried beneath the Sphinx, sealed away for thousands of years? And why do ancient texts speak of a knowledge from the stars, guarded in hidden chambers that may never be found? This is not the Egypt of textbooks and tourist guides. This is a deeper story, a story of secrets too profound, too strange to fit neatly into history as we know it. So sit back, open your mind, and prepare to journey into the shadows of the Nile as we uncover Egypt's lost secrets that cannot be explained. The sun dips low over the horizon of northern Egypt, casting a muted golden light over the marshlands near modern-day Alexandria. The air is thick with the scent of salt water and reeds where the Nile Delta meets the Mediterranean. It is here, among the shifting sands, the forgotten ruins, and the silent waters, that one of history's most enduring mysteries may still lie hidden: the tomb of Cleopatra VII and Mark Antony. For over 2 millennia, their final resting place has eluded discovery. Cleopatra, the last sovereign ruler of Ptolemaic Egypt, and Mark Antony, the Roman general whose passion and ambition shook the foundations of an empire, met their tragic end in 30 BC. According to ancient accounts, the lovers died within days of each other, Cleopatra by her own hand as Octavian's forces closed in, Antony by falling on his sword. Plutarch tells us they were buried together in a mausoleum befitting their royal status, a monument that would honor their love and cement their legacy. And yet, no such tomb has ever been found. Why? The search has spanned centuries, drawing explorers, archaeologists, and dreamers alike to the region. Alexandria, the city they once ruled from, offers few answers. Once a beacon of Hellenistic culture, crowned by the great library and the towering Pharaohs lighthouse, much of ancient Alexandria now rests beneath the sea. Earthquakes and tsunamis in antiquity consumed large swaths of the city. Could the tomb have been lost to those catastrophic events, swallowed by the Mediterranean? Some scholars believe so. They point to submerged ruins, columns, statues, and shattered walls lying in the harbor as evidence that entire districts vanished beneath the waves. It is possible, they argue, that the lovers' final sanctuary lies beneath the ocean floor, encased in silt and silence. But others are not convinced. In recent decades, attention has shifted away from the sunken city toward a site some 30 miles west of Alexandria, Taposiris Magna. Here, among crumbling temple walls dedicated to Osiris, archaeologists have uncovered intriguing clues: statues of a queen's visage, coins bearing Cleopatra's likeness, and underground passages that hint at ritual significance. The site's location near both the sea and the Nile makes it a plausible candidate for a royal burial place. Some suggest that Cleopatra, known for her intellect and deep connection to Egypt's spiritual traditions, may have chosen this temple to align her eternal rest with the god of the afterlife himself. And yet, no definitive evidence has emerged. No sarcophagus, no inscriptions naming the pair, no chamber that could be undeniably called their tomb. Excavations continue, yielding tantalizing fragments, but no answers. Why, after so long, does this mystery endure? There are those who argue that Octavian, soon to become Augustus, Rome's first emperor, may have deliberately erased their burial site from history. Their deaths marked the end of Egyptian independence and the triumph of Rome. Perhaps, some suggest, their legacy was suppressed, their tomb hidden or destroyed to prevent it from becoming a shrine for future generations. Others propose that their burial was intentionally secret, a final act of defiance by loyalists who sought to protect the queen's dignity from her conquerors. And then there are more speculative theories. Could the tomb have been moved long after their deaths, concealed during later upheavals, perhaps even taken inland and hidden in the desert? Some fringe researchers speculate about hidden chambers beneath the modern city, or beneath other ancient temples yet to be excavated. There are whispers of coded references in surviving texts, maps whose meanings have been lost to time, and hints of a legacy far greater than a simple tomb, one tied to mysteries of the Ptolemaic dynasty and its guarded knowledge. What strikes many is how the story of Cleopatra and Antony's tomb mirrors the mythic quality of their lives. Cleopatra herself has been immortalized as both a cunning strategist and a tragic lover, while Antony remains the archetype of the warrior undone by passion. Perhaps it is fitting that their final chapter remains unwritten, that their resting place resists discovery, as if time itself conspires to preserve their enigma. Standing today among the ruins of Taposiris Magna, or gazing out over the quiet waters of Alexandria's bay, one cannot help but wonder, is the tomb just beyond our reach, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself? Or is it lost forever, dissolved into history, like the empire they once sought to shape? The earth still holds its secrets. Somewhere beneath these sands, these stones, or these waves may lie the answer to one of antiquity's greatest puzzles. A tomb that could rewrite what we know of the ancient world and its most iconic queen. Until that day comes, we are left with questions, and with the haunting silence of a love story whose end remains hidden. What, then, still sleeps beneath Egypt's soil? And if we find it, will we be ready for what it reveals? Deep in the arid heart of the Valley of the Kings, the air is still and heavy, the silence broken only by the low whistle of desert winds. The limestone cliffs glow faintly in the dying light of the setting sun, their weathered faces concealing tombs carved millennia ago. Among these graves of pharaohs lies a burial unlike any other, a modest chamber that would, centuries later, captivate the modern world. Here rests Tutankhamun, the boy king whose death, after more than 3,000 years, remains one of ancient Egypt's most enduring enigmas. When Howard Carter pried open the sealed door of Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922, he found a treasure trove beyond imagination. Gilded shrines, jeweled amulets, and the famous golden mask, its serene expression hiding the story of a life cut short. Tutankhamun died around 1323 BC, at just 18 or 19 years old. His reign had lasted barely a decade, yet his death altered the course of Egyptian history. How did such a young ruler perish in the prime of life? The evidence left behind is puzzling. His mummy bears signs of damage, but what caused them? Early examinations in the 20th century suggested that Tutankhamun may have been murdered. X-rays taken in the 1960s appeared to reveal a skull fracture, leading to theories of an assassination, perhaps by political rivals seeking to seize power during a turbulent period in Egypt's history. The idea of a royal conspiracy, whispered through the decades, remains compelling. A young king, surrounded by ambitious courtiers, removed in a bid for control. But later studies cast doubt on that scenario. The skull fracture, once thought to indicate a fatal blow, may have occurred after death, during the mummification process, or perhaps even during Carter's excavation. Modern CT scans have painted a more complex picture. Tutankhamun's body shows evidence of severe injuries to his chest and legs, injuries that some experts argue could have resulted from a violent accident, possibly a chariot crash. Could the boy king have died in a tragic mishap rather than by an assassin's hand? Yet even this explanation is fraught with contradictions. The wounds on his torso appear unusually severe, his sternum and ribs missing entirely. Some researchers believe this may point not to an accident, but to an unconventional embalming process. Chemical analyses have revealed that Tutankhamun's body may have been burned shortly after burial, the result of a rare chemical reaction between his mummification oils and exposure to oxygen. Was this an accident of ancient preservation techniques, or evidence of deliberate desecration? The more one looks, the stranger the picture becomes. Genetic testing has revealed that Tutankhamun suffered from several health problems: malaria, a clubfoot, and possibly a degenerative bone disease. These findings have given rise to another theory, that the boy king was simply too frail to survive long. But here, too, questions remain. Why, if he was so weak, do contemporary inscriptions depict him as an active warrior, driving chariots and hunting? Were these idealized portrayals of a struggling ruler, or do they conceal a reality we have yet to uncover? Some scholars point to the turbulent political climate of the time. Tutankhamun came to power in the aftermath of the Amarna period, when Egypt had been upended by his father, Akhenaten, who abandoned the traditional gods in favor of a single deity. Tutankhamun's reign sought to restore order and the old religious practices, but enemies of the throne may have lingered in the shadows. Was his death a symbolic end to a dynasty still reeling from upheaval? And then, there are those who venture into the more speculative realms. Could the strange injuries and the apparent burning of his remains point to some unknown catastrophe, an explosion in the tomb caused by volatile embalming substances? Or, as some fringe theorists propose, could there be aspects of ancient knowledge, lost rituals or substances that played a role in his mysterious demise? Standing before his golden death mask in the Cairo Museum today, one cannot help but feel the weight of the unknown pressing through the centuries. His eyes, inlaid with obsidian and quartz, seem to gaze past us as though holding secrets he will never share. Tutankhamun's tomb, though dazzling, offered no clear answers. Instead, it raised more questions, a silent riddle entombed in gold and stone. Why did this young king die so suddenly? Was it illness, accident, treachery, or something far beyond our current understanding? And what might we yet learn, hidden still in the sands of the Valley of the Kings, waiting for discovery? The desert keeps its counsel, as it always has. Perhaps somewhere beneath these cliffs, more answers lie waiting. Or perhaps Tutankhamun's final mystery will remain forever unsolved. A reminder that even in the age of science, some secrets of the ancient world refuse to be unearthed. The air within the Valley of the Kings is unnervingly still, as if the desert itself is holding its breath. The sun casts harsh light over the jagged limestone cliffs, but within the narrow tomb of Tutankhamun, shadows reign. Here, beneath layers of rock and centuries of silence, Howard Carter stood in November 1922, peering through a small breach in the sealed doorway. By candlelight, he glimpsed treasures glinting in the darkness, gold, ivory, and artifacts untouched since the boy king's burial over 3,000 years ago. "Can you see anything?" his patron, Lord Carnarvon, asked. Carter's now immortal reply, "Yes, wonderful things." The world soon shared in his wonder. The discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb, virtually intact, was hailed as the greatest archaeological find of the 20th century. But almost as quickly as the celebrations began, whispers of something far darker emerged. Rumors of a curse, said to guard the pharaoh's resting place against intruders. It began with death. Just months after the tomb's opening, Lord Carnarvon, the man who financed the expedition, died suddenly in Cairo from blood poisoning, the result of an infected mosquito bite. Newspapers across Europe and beyond seized upon the story, linking his death to a supposed inscription found within the tomb. "Death shall come on swift wings to him who disturbs the peace of the king." The phrase, though never definitively confirmed by Carter's records, ignited a firestorm of public fascination. Was this coincidence or something more? In the years that followed, more names were added to the so-called curses tally. George J. Gould, an American financier who visited the tomb, died of pneumonia shortly afterward. A British nobleman involved in the expedition collapsed mysteriously while in Cairo. Even Carter's canary, said to have been swallowed by a cobra, symbol of the Egyptian monarchy, was woven into the growing legend. By the time a series of sudden deaths had been linked, however tenuously, to the excavation, the idea of a curse of the pharaohs had taken root in the public imagination. Scholars and scientists, of course, offered rational explanations. The tombs of ancient Egypt, sealed for centuries, could harbor deadly bacteria or mold spores. Lord Carnarvon's death, they pointed out, was hardly supernatural. He was already in frail health, and infection in the early 20th century often proved fatal. Many who entered the tomb, including Howard Carter himself, lived for decades afterward, seemingly unaffected by any curse. Yet the pattern of untimely deaths, even if circumstantial, refuses to die. Why do we remain so captivated by the idea of a curse? Perhaps because it aligns so perfectly with the mystique of ancient Egypt, a civilization steeped in rituals of death and protection for the afterlife. The ancient Egyptians believed deeply in the sanctity of the tomb. Inscriptions across the Valley of the Kings do warn of dire consequences for those who desecrate the resting places of the dead. Could Tutankhamun's tomb have been more than a mere burial chamber? Could it have been a spiritual fortress, imbued with protective rites we no longer understand? Some point to the eerie circumstances surrounding the expedition itself. Electrical power failed across Cairo at the exact moment of Carnarvon's death, plunging the city into darkness. His dog, back in England, reportedly howled and collapsed dead at the same instant. Are these accounts embellished legend, or hints of something we cannot measure? Fringe theories take the mystery further. There are those who suggest the curse may not be a mystical force, but the product of an ancient science, a knowledge of biotoxins or chemical traps long since lost to history. Could the ancients have engineered a form of posthumous defense, an invisible sentinel to guard their king's slumber? Others reach beyond the earthly entirely, speculating about unseen energies tied to the layout of the tomb, the alignment of sacred sites, or forces modern science has yet to comprehend. Still, the evidence remains elusive. No definitive curse was inscribed in Tutankhamun's burial chamber. No concrete mechanism of vengeance has ever been proven. And yet, as one stands before the boy king's sarcophagus, beneath the painted ceiling of stars meant to guide him through eternity, the question lingers. Is it truly only myth? Or is there, buried within these stones, a legacy of warning from a civilization that understood death and its mysteries far more intimately than we do? Even Howard Carter, ever the pragmatic archaeologist, could not entirely dispel the notion. In later years, he spoke little of the curse, dismissing it publicly but perhaps wary of fueling further frenzy. When he died peacefully in 1939, some proclaimed it proof that the curse was nothing but fiction. Others wondered if his survival was because he, unlike many, had shown respect to the tomb and its occupant. The Valley of the Kings remains silent on the matter. The sands that swallowed dynasties keep their secrets well. Perhaps there was never a curse, only coincidence, amplified by human imagination. Or perhaps the ancients succeeded in a final act of defiance, not to punish intruders, but to remind us that some boundaries are not meant to be crossed without consequence. And so the legend endures. Every time a new tomb is uncovered, every time a sealed chamber is breached, the same question arises in hushed tones. Are we disturbing something that was never meant to be touched? As you leave Tutankhamun's tomb today, stepping out from shadow into the harsh glare of the desert sun, that question follows you. Was the curse merely a story? Or is it still waiting unseen to claim its next chapter? The desert wind whispers across the desolate ruins of Amarna, carrying with it the fine dust of a city long abandoned. Once this place was alive with chants to a single god, the sound of hammers striking limestone, and the grandeur of royal processions. Now it is little more than a scattering of foundations beneath the relentless Egyptian sun. Here stood the city of Akhenaten, the horizon of the Aten, founded by one of Egypt's most enigmatic rulers, Pharaoh Akhenaten. His reign and his disappearance remain among the deepest mysteries of the ancient world. Akhenaten, who ascended the throne as Amenhotep IV around 1353 BC, shattered centuries of tradition. He rejected the powerful pantheon of Egyptian gods, dismantling the worship of Amun and the religious institutions that had long held sway over the kingdom. In their place, he elevated the Aten, the sun disk, as the sole deity, declaring himself the living intermediary of this new divine order. This was not merely a religious reform, it was a revolution. Temples to the old gods were closed, their names chiseled from monuments. The very fabric of Egyptian society trembled under his decree. But as suddenly as he rose, Akhenaten vanished. By the end of his reign, around 13 or 36 BC, the records grow thin, almost deliberately erased. His city was abandoned, his name omitted from king lists, and his monuments defaced. It was as if the land itself had conspired to forget him. Why? Mainstream historians suggest political backlash as the likely cause. Akhenaten's radical reforms destabilized Egypt's religious and economic foundations. By weakening the priesthood of Amun and centralizing power under his new cult of Aten, he created powerful enemies. After his death, these forces may have sought to erase every trace of him, restoring the old gods and ensuring that history would remember him only as a heretic. His immediate successor, the mysterious Smenkhkare, or perhaps his own wife Nefertiti, may have served as a brief bridge between his rule and the eventual restoration under Tutankhamun. And yet, this explanation does not answer all the questions. If Akhenaten died naturally, where is his tomb? No definitive burial site has ever been found. Fragments of a possible sarcophagus and funerary equipment have surfaced, but they tell an incomplete story. Some scholars believe his remains might lie in the royal tomb at Amarna, though it was never finished. Others argue he was secretly buried in the Valley of the Kings, perhaps under another name, to conceal his legacy. But without conclusive evidence, these remain theories, pieces of a puzzle scattered across time. Speculation deepens when one considers the unique nature of Akhenaten himself. His artistic depictions break sharply from traditional Egyptian iconography. He is shown with elongated features, almond-shaped eyes, a narrow face, full lips, and a distended belly. Was this simply artistic symbolism, emphasizing his divine connection to the Aten? Or did Akhenaten truly possess unusual physical traits? Modern medical analyses of mummy candidates thought to be related to him suggest genetic disorders like Marfan syndrome or Froelich's syndrome, but no identification has been definitively confirmed. The strangeness of his appearance has fueled more radical theories, that Akhenaten was not entirely of this world, or that his rule was influenced by knowledge far beyond his time. Even the sudden reversal of his religious reforms raises questions. How could a movement so sweeping, enforced by a pharaoh's power, vanish almost overnight? Was it simply the will of a populace eager to return to tradition, or did something more dramatic occur? Some fringe researchers point to unexplained gaps in the archaeological record, missing inscriptions, unfinished temples, and peculiar references in later texts that speak of dark times following his reign. Were these the result of natural disaster, foreign invasion, or something more elusive? There is also the enduring enigma of Nefertiti, Akhenaten's queen, whose own fate is unclear. Some suggest she ruled as co-regent under the name Smenkhkare after his death, possibly continuing his vision in secret before being erased herself. Others speculate that she turned against him, aligning with the priests of Amun to restore the old ways. The silence of the records invites endless conjecture. Standing amid the barren ruins of Amarna today, one can almost feel the weight of that silence. The city was built in a frenzy of devotion to a single god and then abandoned in equal haste, left to crumble beneath the desert sky. What knowledge died here? What truths were deliberately hidden? Did Akhenaten's experiment in monotheism simply fail, or was it forcibly buried by those who feared its implications? Perhaps, somewhere beneath the sands, the answers lie waiting, a sealed chamber holding the remains of a pharaoh who dared to defy an empire's gods. Or perhaps his disappearance was meant to remain permanent, a warning from the past about the fragility of power and the cost of challenging the divine order. And so we are left with an absence more haunting than any discovery. A ruler whose legacy was almost erased, whose body is lost, and whose vision flickers only faintly through the fragments we have recovered. Did Akhenaten truly vanish into the oblivion his enemies intended? Or is his story still waiting to be uncovered? Beneath the rugged cliffs of the Valley of the Kings, the air hangs heavy with stillness. The desert here feels eternal, its silence broken only by the occasional gust of wind, stirring fine grains of sand that whisper over the weathered rock. Hidden within these cliffs lie the tombs of Egypt's most powerful rulers, corridors carved deep into the earth to ensure their journey into eternity. Yet among these resting places, one figure remains conspicuously absent: Queen Nefertiti, the woman whose beauty and influence became legendary. Her image endures, immortalized in the exquisite painted bust now housed in Berlin, its delicate features and graceful neck making her one of the most recognized figures of the ancient world. But while her likeness has survived for over 3 millennia, her final resting place has never been found. How could one of Egypt's most prominent queens simply vanish from history? Nefertiti, the great royal wife of Akhenaten, stood at the heart of one of ancient Egypt's most transformative and controversial eras. Together, they ruled during the Amarna period, a time when Egypt's traditional pantheon was overturned in favor of the singular worship of the Aten, the sun disk. Unlike many queens before her, Nefertiti was no silent consort. Depictions show her performing rituals alongside the pharaoh, smiting enemies, and wearing the blue crown of kingship, a symbol of authority typically reserved for male rulers. Some historians believe she may have ruled Egypt in her own right after Akhenaten's disappearance, possibly under the name Neferneferuaten, or even as the enigmatic figure Smenkhkare. Yet, after this period of prominence, the records grow silent. Her name disappears from inscriptions, her image is erased from monuments, and her body is nowhere to be found. Why? The most straightforward explanation suggests that Nefertiti died before the end of Akhenaten's reign and was buried in Amarna, the city they built for their god. But Amarna was abandoned shortly after Akhenaten's death, its royal tombs left incomplete and its treasures stripped or destroyed. If she was buried there, her remains may have been lost to time. Others argue that she was brought back to Thebes, the traditional seat of power, and interred in the Valley of the Kings, but her tomb has yet to be identified. In recent years, one site has captured worldwide attention: the Tomb of Tutankhamun. In 2015, British archaeologist Nicholas Reeves proposed that hidden chambers might lie behind its painted walls, based on high-resolution scans. showing what appeared to be outlines of sealed doorways. Reeves suggested that these could lead to a larger, undiscovered tomb, possibly Nefertiti's. The theory electrified the archaeological community and the public alike. Could the famous boy king's tomb be merely an antechamber to a greater royal burial? Initial scans seemed promising, but subsequent investigations yielded conflicting results. Some experts argued that the anomalies in the scans were natural features of the rock, not hidden doors. Excavations have yet to confirm or deny the existence of such chambers, leaving the question tantalizingly open. Other researchers point to KV-35, a tomb in the Valley of the Kings where several unidentified royal mummies were found in a side chamber. Among them was the so-called Younger Lady, whose DNA analysis suggests she was Tutankhamun's mother and the sister of Akhenaten. Could this be Nefertiti? The evidence is inconclusive. While the genetic ties fit, there is no inscription, no artifact, no definitive marker to confirm her identity. Beyond these mainstream debates lie more speculative ideas. Some propose that Nefertiti's tomb was deliberately hidden to protect her legacy during the backlash against the Amarna revolution. Others suggest that her burial may contain secrets, rituals, artifacts, or knowledge that the priests of Amun sought to suppress. Fringe theorists even claim that the extraordinary craftsmanship of her famous bust hints at lost technologies or cultural exchanges far beyond what we currently understand. Standing today in the Valley of the Kings, one cannot escape a sense of unfinished business. The cliffs are dotted with entrances leading into darkness, some still unexplored. How many secrets remain sealed within these hills? How many names of queens and kings lie forgotten beneath the desert floor? Nefertiti's story lingers like a ghost in Egyptian history, present in fragments, absent in conclusion. Her life was one of power, beauty, and profound influence, yet her death remains a void. Did she die quietly, her burial lost to history? Did she rule as a hidden pharaoh, her tomb disguised to protect her memory? Or does she still rest undisturbed, waiting for the day when human curiosity and persistence finally bring her back into the light? The desert does not answer. It waits. Somewhere beneath the sands of Egypt, perhaps behind a wall in a known tomb or in a chamber yet untouched, lies the answer to one of the greatest mysteries of the ancient world. Until then, Nefertiti remains what she has always been, a figure of beauty, power, and enduring enigma. What secrets does she still keep? And when they are finally uncovered, will they change our understanding of Egypt forever? The sun rises over the Giza Plateau, turning the sands a brilliant shade of gold. And there, dominating the horizon, stands the Great Pyramid, its massive silhouette casting a shadow that stretches across the desert like a monument to eternity itself. Built over 4,500 years ago, it is the last surviving wonder of the ancient world, a structure of staggering precision and scale. For centuries, it has inspired awe, speculation, and a question that refuses to fade. What lies hidden within? From the outside, the Great Pyramid of Khufu appears solid, impenetrable, a mountain of limestone blocks weighing millions of tons. But within its core lies a network of passageways and chambers, some known, many still mysterious. The King's Chamber, the Queen's Chamber, the Grand Gallery. These are the spaces we have explored. Yet for all our discoveries, the pyramid has not given up all its secrets. In 2017, an international team of scientists using a technique called muon tomography, a form of cosmic ray imaging, detected a previously unknown void deep within the structure. Measuring at least 100 feet long, this hidden space lies above the Grand Gallery, sealed off from any known corridor. What is it? Why was it built? Theories abound. Some suggest it is a simple structural cavity, a byproduct of relieving pressure from the massive stones above. Others believe it could be an undiscovered chamber, perhaps one containing artifacts or royal remains lost to time. This is not the first time whispers of hidden spaces within the pyramid have captured imaginations. In the 19th century, explorers speculated about secret rooms housing the true burial of Khufu, or even repositories of lost knowledge. Ancient texts themselves hint at treasures and writings sealed within the pyramid's heart, though no definitive evidence has ever been found. Could these accounts be mere myth, or are they glimpses of something deliberately concealed by the pyramid's builders? The construction of the Great Pyramid itself adds to the mystery. Its alignment to true north is astonishingly precise, accurate to within a fraction of a degree. The dimensions of its base encode mathematical constants and astronomical relationships that continue to intrigue researchers. Was this the result of extraordinary observational skill, or is there more to it than we understand? Some argue that such precision points to a sophisticated understanding of engineering and science far beyond what we typically attribute to the ancient world. And then there are the more speculative theories, those that push beyond conventional archaeology. Some suggest the pyramid may have served purposes beyond a royal tomb, a monumental observatory, a power plant of sorts, or even a repository of ancient wisdom meant to outlast civilizations. Fringe ideas propose that the hidden chamber might hold artifacts that could rewrite history as we know it, knowledge of medicine, astronomy, or technology preserved from a forgotten age. Others go further still, linking the structure to celestial alignments and proposing connections to cultures far beyond Egypt's borders. Most scholars caution against such leaps, emphasizing that extraordinary precision does not necessarily imply extraordinary origins. Yet even they acknowledge that the pyramid's full story remains incomplete. Every new investigation raises more questions than answers. Why, for example, are there small shafts leading from the king's and queen's chambers to the exterior of the pyramid, too narrow for human passage? Were they symbolic pathways for the pharaoh's soul, or something more functional, now lost to time? Standing within the dimly lit corridors of the Great Pyramid, the weight of its mystery is almost palpable. The stone walls seem to hum with history, their surfaces bearing the marks of hands that labored millennia ago. And above, somewhere beyond the reach of our eyes and instruments, lies that newly discovered void, silent, sealed, and waiting. What could it contain? The final resting place of Khufu himself, long thought empty? A cache of texts from an age we barely comprehend? Or nothing at all, save for the enduring reminder that even our most iconic monuments can still keep secrets from us? The Great Pyramid has stood through empires, wars, and the relentless passage of time. It has witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, yet it guards its mysteries with unbroken resolve. Perhaps as technology advances, we will one day uncover the truth of what lies within. Or perhaps, as the builders intended, some knowledge is meant to remain forever beyond our grasp. And so, as the sun sets over Giza and the pyramid's shadow merges once more with the desert, we are left to wonder. In a structure so thoroughly studied, so deeply examined, what else waits unseen in the darkness? What truths of the ancient world still sleep beneath those monumental stones? Inside the Great Pyramid, the air is cool and dry, carrying the faint scent of ancient stone. The narrow passageways echo with each step, leading upward through the grand gallery to a chamber deep within the heart of the monument. This is the king's chamber, rectangular, austere, and empty, save for a massive granite sarcophagus. It is here, according to long-held belief, that Pharaoh Khufu was laid to rest over 4,500 years ago. And yet, when modern explorers first entered this room, they found something profoundly unsettling. The body of Khufu was missing. Khufu, known to the Greeks as Cheops, was the builder of the Great Pyramid, one of history's most extraordinary feats of engineering. His reign, around 2589 to 2566 BC, marked the height of Egypt's Old Kingdom, a time of immense power and monumental ambition. The pyramid itself, with its precise construction and colossal scale, was intended to ensure his immortality. But if this was his tomb, where is he? This question has baffled archaeologists for centuries. No mummy, no funerary treasures, no definitive inscriptions identifying Khufu have ever been found within the pyramid. The sarcophagus, though massive and intricately crafted, was discovered empty, its lid gone. Was it plundered in antiquity? Or was Khufu never buried here at all? The most common explanation is that looters desecrated the tomb long ago, stealing not only the treasures but the body itself. Ancient Egypt was no stranger to grave robbers. Even royal tombs in the Valley of the Kings were violated. Yet this theory leaves troubling gaps. The king's chamber lies deep within the pyramid, accessible only through narrow, winding passages. How could thieves have reached it without leaving clear evidence of forced entry? And why would they remove the body but leave the sarcophagus itself behind? Some scholars propose that Khufu's burial goods were stripped during the political upheavals of Egypt's first intermediate period, centuries after his death. Others suggest that his remains were moved to another, as yet undiscovered location to protect them from desecration. But where? Despite extensive excavations around Giza, no alternate tomb for Khufu has been found. The mystery deepens when we consider the pyramid's own design. Unlike later tombs, it lacks wall inscriptions or elaborate decoration celebrating the king's life and journey to the afterlife. Could this signify that the Great Pyramid was never intended as a conventional tomb, or was something erased, perhaps deliberately, from its interior? Some researchers believe the absence of Khufu's remains may point to a profound reinterpretation of the pyramid's purpose. Was it truly built solely as a burial monument? Or did it serve another function altogether? Fringe theories abound, suggesting it might have been a monumental cenotaph, a structure symbolizing eternal kingship without housing the physical body. Others propose that Khufu may have been interred in a hidden chamber yet to be discovered, one concealed so effectively that it has eluded thousands of years of exploration. Modern technology has begun to probe these possibilities. The discovery of previously unknown voids within the pyramid has reignited speculation that a secret burial chamber could still exist. Could Khufu himself still rest, undisturbed, in a place we have yet to uncover? Or is his absence a deliberate mystery left by the ancients, a puzzle meant to endure through the ages? Then there are those who take the speculation further still. Some claim Khufu's remains were never meant to be found, that he underwent a burial ritual lost to time, perhaps involving the deliberate destruction or dispersal of his body. Others wonder if the pyramid's true purpose was not funerary at all, but symbolic, a structure built to align heaven and earth, its empty sarcophagus a vessel not for flesh, but for something more transcendent. Standing within the king's chamber today, one is struck not by grandeur, but by an almost unsettling simplicity. The walls are bare, the chamber silent. The sarcophagus, hewn from a single block of granite, is the only witness to whatever occurred here. Did Khufu once lie within it, only to be spirited away by human hands? Or was this room always meant to be empty, a riddle in stone that defies the passage of time? The Great Pyramid still holds its secrets, and perhaps none is more haunting than this: the missing body of the man who commanded its construction. Was his immortality secured not through preservation of the flesh, but through the enduring enigma of his absence? As the light of the setting sun strikes the pyramid's weathered stones, turning them briefly to fire before darkness descends, the question lingers: what became of Khufu? And in seeking his remains, are we merely searching for a man, or for the truth behind one of humanity's most enduring mysteries. The desert west of the Nile stretches endlessly, a vast, unforgiving sea of sand where the horizon blurs into a wavering line of heat. This is the Egyptian Western Desert, a landscape of silence and extremes. It was here, according to ancient sources, that one of history's great mysteries unfolded: the disappearance of an entire army, 50,000 strong, vanished without a trace. The story begins in 525 BC, during the reign of Cambyses II, the son of Cyrus the Great and ruler of the Persian Empire. After conquering Egypt, Cambyses sought to expand his control further west, to the land of the Ammonians, whose oracle of Amen, nestled deep in the Libyan desert, rivaled the prestige of Delphi in Greece. Herodotus, the Greek historian writing nearly a century later, tells us that Cambyses dispatched an army to destroy the oracle, a symbolic act meant to assert dominance over Egypt's spiritual and cultural heartlands. The force set out from Thebes, heading into the desert under the relentless Egyptian sun. They marched with provisions, guides, and the confidence of imperial might. For several days, all went according to plan. Then, somewhere beyond the oasis of Karga, they were swallowed by the desert and were never seen again. What happened to them? Herodotus records that after reaching the city of Oasis, the army ventured into the deep desert, where a sudden, cataclysmic sandstorm descended upon them. A wind of irresistible violence, he writes, overwhelmed them, burying them beneath the sand. For centuries, this account stood as the accepted version of events. A natural disaster wiping out an entire army, its remains entombed beneath shifting dunes. But is this explanation too simple? Modern researchers have long debated the plausibility of Herodotus's tale. Some argue that while sandstorms in the region can be deadly, the complete annihilation of a massive, organized force stretches credibility. If they were buried, where are their remains? Despite numerous expeditions and decades of searching, no definitive trace of Cambyses' army has ever been found. No weapons, no armor, no human remains. In the 20th and 21st centuries, various expeditions have claimed tantalizing discoveries: fragments of bronze weapons, pieces of pottery, even skeletal remains thought to be linked to the lost army. Yet none have provided conclusive evidence. Some archaeologists suggest these finds belong to later periods, unconnected to Cambyses' campaign. Others argue that the desert itself, with its shifting sands and harsh conditions, may have erased nearly all traces over millennia. And still, other theories emerge. One line of thought is that the army was never destroyed by nature at all, but by man. Some historians propose that they may have been ambushed by hostile tribes or betrayed by their guides, their demise concealed by those who stood to benefit from Persia's failure. Could the army have been massacred in a remote valley, their remains hidden beneath layers of rock and sand far from the route Herodotus described? There are even more speculative ideas. Some point to the oracle of Amun itself, suggesting that Cambyses' attempt to destroy such a sacred site may have invited retribution, not from the gods, but from a coalition of local forces determined to defend it. Others entertain the notion of a deliberate cover-up within Persia, that the army's failure was so catastrophic, so humiliating, that its true fate was suppressed, leaving only legends in its place. And then there are those who look to the desert itself for answers, not as a passive landscape, but as an active force. The Libyan desert is home to unique geological phenomena: sudden ground collapses, shifting dunes that migrate and bury entire regions, and mirages so convincing they can lure travelers to their deaths. Could the army have marched into one of these natural traps, their fate sealed not by human malice, but by the indifference of nature? Standing at the edge of the Great Sand Sea today, one cannot help but feel the weight of that possibility. The dunes stretch endlessly, their crests shimmering under the sun, their valleys hiding whatever secrets they may hold. Somewhere beneath this vast expanse, perhaps, lies the final resting place of Cambyses' army, a silent graveyard of bronze and bone, waiting to be uncovered. Or perhaps there is nothing at all, only the lingering echo of a story too compelling to forget. The desert does not give up its secrets easily. For now, the fate of Cambyses' lost army remains an open question, a mystery straddling the line between history and legend. Were they truly buried by a sudden storm, erased by human hands, or is their disappearance a reminder that even the mightiest of empires can vanish into silence? As the sun sinks over the horizon, the desert cools, and the first stars emerge in the darkening sky. In this vast emptiness, it is easy to imagine those soldiers still out there, their voices carried on the wind, their story incomplete. What truly happened in those endless sands? And will we ever know? Or will the western desert keep its secret for eternity? South of modern-day Cairo, beyond the fertile lands of the Fayum Oasis, lies a landscape of dust and ruins, silent witnesses to Egypt's Middle Kingdom. Here, near the pyramid of Amenemhat III at Hawara, once stood a structure so vast, so complex, that ancient travelers called it one of the marvels of the world. They named it simply the Labyrinth. Today, little remains above ground, crumbled stones, scattered blocks, and sand erasing what was once extraordinary. But what exactly was this labyrinth, and why did it disappear? The Labyrinth of Amenemhat III, built during the 12th dynasty around 1850 BC, was described by classical writers with awe and reverence. The Greek historian Herodotus, visiting in the 5th century BC, claimed it surpassed even the pyramids. He wrote of a sprawling complex of halls, courts, and chambers, 3,000 rooms in total, divided between upper and lower levels, all connected by intricate corridors. Strabo, writing centuries later, echoed these accounts, describing a palace of many palaces, each dedicated to a different nome or province of Egypt. To these ancient witnesses, the labyrinth was not merely an architectural feat. It was a monument to order and unity, a symbol of a kingdom at the height of its power. And yet, this grand structure has vanished almost entirely. Excavations at Hawara in the 19th and early 20th centuries uncovered traces of foundations, fragments of carved stone, and evidence of large-scale construction, but nothing approaching the grandeur described by Herodotus or Strabo. What happened to it? The simplest explanation is time itself. The labyrinth, constructed primarily of limestone, may have been dismantled over the centuries, its blocks repurposed for other building projects, its superstructure lost to erosion and neglect. The Fayum region, rich in agriculture, would have been an ideal source of stone for generations of builders. But if that is the case, why do the ancient accounts describe it in such vivid detail? And why do they speak of underground chambers that no excavation has definitively revealed? Some researchers argue that the true heart of the labyrinth lies below the surface, untouched. Early 20th century excavations by Flinders Petrie revealed extensive substructures beneath the Hawara pyramid, passages, false doors, and traps designed to thwart tomb robbers. Could the labyrinth described by Herodotus have been a combination of above-ground ceremonial halls and a vast subterranean network still hidden from us? Modern geophysical surveys of the area have detected anomalies, large unexplained features beneath the sands. Yet definitive exploration has been slow, hampered by logistical challenges and the risk of damaging what may remain. The purpose of the labyrinth adds another layer of intrigue. Was it simply a mortuary temple complex serving Amenemhat III's pyramid? Or was it something more? Some Egyptologists believe it functioned as a grand administrative center, a physical manifestation of centralized power where each province was represented in a vast hall of unity. Others suggest it was a place of ritual significance, a ceremonial landscape designed to mirror cosmic order, with the king at its center. More speculative ideas go further still. Some propose that the labyrinth's complexity hints at knowledge far beyond its time, an ancient repository of texts, technologies, or sacred wisdom sealed away beneath its floors. Legends of hidden archives, sometimes called the Hall of Records, have long circulated in connection with Egyptian monuments, suggesting that beneath sites like Hawara may lie the secrets of Egypt's forgotten past. Could the labyrinth of Amenemhat III have been one such repository, now buried under millennia of silence? And then there is the enigma of why it vanished from memory so completely. Other monumental sites, like the pyramids and temples of Luxor, remained known throughout history, even in ruins. Why did the labyrinth, once so celebrated, fade almost entirely from collective memory? Was it deliberately erased, its stones scattered to obliterate its significance? Or did its disappearance serve another purpose, leaving only whispers of what once was? Standing at Hawara today, it is difficult to reconcile the desolation of the site with the grandeur described by ancient authors. The ground is flat, featureless, save for the weathered remains of Amenemhat's pyramid, its outer casing long gone. Yet beneath one's feet, perhaps just meters below, might lie the remnants of a structure that once awed the ancient world. What sleeps in those buried halls, if they still exist? Lost treasures of the Middle Kingdom? Records of a civilization's deepest knowledge? Or nothing more than empty chambers, their secrets long since claimed by time? The desert does not answer. It merely waits. And as the sun sets over the Fayum, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold, one is left to wonder, is the labyrinth of Amenemhat III truly gone? Or is it still there, hidden beneath the sands, holding its silence until we are ready to uncover it? Beneath the shadow of the step pyramid of Djoser at Saqqara, the wind drifts softly across a landscape layered with history. The plateau stretches out in ochre hues, dotted with tombs and crumbling mastabas, resting places of nobles and kings long past. Yet amid this necropolis, one figure remains conspicuously absent: Imhotep, the man who designed the step pyramid itself, Egypt's first monumental stone building, and whose legacy has echoed through millennia. Imhotep was no ordinary man. Serving under Pharaoh Djoser around 2650 BC, he was an architect, physician, priest, and scholar, a polymath whose brilliance elevated him from commoner to near-divine status. Ancient inscriptions credit him with designing the world's first stone pyramid, revolutionizing architecture and laying the foundation for all monumental construction that followed. In later centuries, he was deified, worshipped as a god of wisdom and healing, and honored by both Egyptians and, later, the Greeks, who identified him with their own Asclepius. And yet, despite his immense stature, his tomb, the final resting place of one of humanity's greatest minds, has never been found. Where is Imhotep buried? Most scholars believe his tomb lies somewhere within the Saqqara necropolis, close to the step pyramid he built for Djoser. Excavations in the area have uncovered countless tombs of officials from the same era, as well as vast catacombs filled with mummified ibises dedicated to Imhotep's cult centuries later. Yet the tomb of the man himself remains elusive. Some suspect it has already been discovered but not recognized, lost among the uninscribed or plundered burials. Others believe it still lies hidden, untouched in the desert's embrace. The search has yielded tantalizing hints. In the 20th century, excavations uncovered a vast complex of subterranean galleries beneath Saqqara, passageways lined with millions of mummified birds, offerings to Imhotep made long after his death. Scholars argue that such devotion implies a nearby significant burial site, perhaps a shrine or tomb of the man deified. In 2020, ground-penetrating radar surveys revealed anomalies beneath the sands not far from the Step Pyramid, massive, unexplained voids that some believe could conceal monumental structures. Could one of these be Imhotep's tomb? The mystery deepens when considering Imhotep's extraordinary posthumous reputation. Unlike most non-royal figures of his time, Imhotep transcended mortality in the collective memory of Egypt. By the late period, over 2,000 years after his life, temples were dedicated to him. Pilgrims sought healing at sanctuaries bearing his name. Was his burial treated with equal reverence, perhaps hidden deliberately to protect it from desecration? If so, could his tomb contain not only his remains but also records of his architectural innovations, medical treatises, and religious insights? Texts that might rewrite our understanding of ancient knowledge? Speculative theories take this further. Some suggest that Imhotep's tomb might house a library of sorts, a repository of wisdom preserved from Egypt's early dynastic period, or even earlier traditions. Fringe theorists, pointing to his sudden genius and the leap in construction techniques under his direction, wonder whether Imhotep inherited knowledge from a forgotten civilization, one that left no trace but its ideas. While mainstream archaeology sees no need for such explanations, the allure of a hidden trove of ancient science continues to captivate imaginations worldwide. And yet, the sands of Saqqara keep their secrets. Despite decades of exploration, vast portions of the necropolis remain unexcavated, and much of what has been uncovered lies beneath layers of history still being interpreted. Each discovery, a new tomb, a hidden shaft, a fragment of inscription, adds context but not closure. The absence of Imhotep's tomb is a void not just in archaeology, but in our understanding of a figure who shaped civilization itself. Standing on the plateau today, as the sun lowers toward the horizon, one can look toward the Step Pyramid and imagine Imhotep overseeing its construction, a visionary watching stone rise toward the sky for the first time in history. Somewhere nearby, perhaps beneath the very ground on which you stand, lies the answer to one of Egypt's most enduring mysteries. Is Imhotep's tomb still waiting for us, sealed and undisturbed beneath the desert? Does it hold the final testament of a man whose genius changed the world? Or will it remain forever hidden, a reminder that even the brightest lights of history can be swallowed by time? The desert offers no response. Only the wind moves, whispering softly over Saqqara's sands, as if guarding the secret of the man who gave Egypt its first pyramid, and whose own resting place remains an unsolved riddle. In the quiet halls of the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, beneath soft, muted lights, lies one of the most iconic figures of the ancient world. His face, thin but regal, stares out from beyond 3 millennia, deep-set eyes, a strong jaw, and a faintly defiant expression even in death. This is Ramses II, known as Ramses the Great, the warrior pharaoh who ruled Egypt for more than 6 decades, built monumental temples from Abu Simbel to Luxor, and fought the Battle of Kadesh to a standstill against the Hittites. Yet, for all his grandeur in life, the story of what happened to his body after death is as enigmatic as any mystery in Egypt's long history. Ramses II died around 1213 BC at the age of about 90, an extraordinary lifespan for his era. He was entombed in the Valley of the Kings, likely in a richly adorned tomb befitting Egypt's mightiest ruler. But when modern archaeologists rediscovered his remains in the 19th century, they were not found in his original tomb. Instead, His mummy was hidden in a secret cache with dozens of other royal mummies, far from the splendor of his intended resting place. Why? The answer, at first glance, seems practical. During the late New Kingdom, Egypt faced internal turmoil, economic decline, and waves of tomb robberies. Priests of the 21st dynasty, seeking to protect the sacred bodies of the kings, gathered them from their violated tombs and reburied them in hidden locations. Ramses II's mummy was eventually discovered in 1881 at Deir el-Bahari, near Luxor, in a high cliffside cache along with more than 50 other royals. On the surface, this is a story of preservation, an act of reverence in desperate times. But as with so many Egyptian mysteries, the details raise more questions than they answer. Why, for instance, was Ramses's body moved multiple times before being placed in the final cache? Ancient inscriptions on the wrappings record at least 3 relocations over a span of decades. Was this merely the result of repeated threats from robbers? Or was there another reason? Some historians wonder whether these moves reflect shifting political and religious priorities. As the power of the priesthood of Amun grew, did they seek to control not just the temples of the living, but also the eternal fate of the dead? Were the kings, even in death, pawns in a struggle for dominance over Egypt's spiritual legacy? The condition of Ramses's mummy itself adds to the intrigue. Studies in the late 20th century revealed unusual aspects of its preservation. The body was treated with an exceptionally high amount of resin and other materials, some of which caused chemical burns to the skin. Was this an overzealous attempt at preservation, or could it suggest that his body had suffered damage before or during its relocations? Some experts propose that the priests may have had to repair or rewrap the pharaoh multiple times due to earlier mishandling, or even intentional defacement by those who viewed him as a symbol of the old order. More speculative theories venture beyond priestly politics. Could Ramses's multiple reburials have been part of a hidden ritual, one meant to ensure his continued power in the afterlife? Ancient Egyptian texts often describe complex rites to renew and protect the king's Ka, or life force. Were these moves simply pragmatic, or were they part of an effort to maintain a connection between Ramses and the gods during a time of national uncertainty? And then there is the curious modern chapter of Ramses's journey. In 1976, his mummy was flown to Paris for conservation and study, complete with a passport listing his occupation as king, deceased. French scientists discovered that he suffered from severe arthritis, dental problems, and possibly an infection at the time of his death. But even this 20th century relocation sparked whispers of unease, echoes of the ancient belief that disturbing a pharaoh could carry consequences. Some fringe researchers go further still. They question whether the mummy we now call Ramses II is truly him at all. DNA analysis has confirmed his lineage as part of the Ramesside dynasty, but doubts linger in the minds of those who note the extensive rewrapping and multiple interventions over the centuries. Could identity have been lost in the chaos of repeated relocations? Is the body in Cairo the genuine remains of the pharaoh who once called himself the ruler of rulers? Or have we been paying homage to an impostor for over a century? Standing before Ramses II's mummy today, it is hard to escape the sense of a story still unfinished. The body of the man who led Egypt at its zenith now lies in a glass case, thousands of miles and thousands of years from his intended eternal home. Was his journey one of protection, reverence, and survival against the odds? Or does it reflect a deeper, more unsettling truth about the fate of Egypt's kings in a world where power, even divine power, proved transient? The desert has hidden many secrets, but this one remains in plain sight, an enigma encased in linen, silent yet speaking volumes. Will we ever know the full truth of Ramses II's journey through death and beyond? Or will the great pharaoh's final mystery endure, reminding us that even the mightiest of kings cannot escape the shadows of time? In the heart of the Valley of the Kings, where the limestone cliffs rise like jagged sentinels over the silent desert, lies a tomb that has confounded scholars for more than a century. Designated simply as KV55, it is unremarkable at first glance, small, unfinished, lacking the grandeur of the royal burials nearby. Yet within its modest confines was found a collection of artifacts and a human skeleton that have ignited one of Egyptology's greatest debates: who was buried here and why. The tomb was discovered in 1907 by Edward Ayrton, working under the patronage of Theodore Davis. Upon entering, the excavators found a strange assemblage of items, funerary objects bearing the names of several members of the Amarna royal family, including Akhenaten, Nefertiti, and their daughters. There were pieces of gilded shrine panels that had once belonged to Queen Tiye, Akhenaten's mother, and a desecrated coffin seemingly intended for a woman but altered for a man. Most striking of all was a single, poorly preserved mummy. Its identity remains one of ancient Egypt's most enduring riddles. Who was this individual? Initial assumptions pointed to Akhenaten himself, the heretic pharaoh who had upended Egypt's religious order by promoting the worship of the Aten, the sun disk. The desecrated coffin lid bore traces of his cartouche, though it had been deliberately erased. Yet other evidence complicated this theory. Anatomical analysis suggested the skeleton belonged to a man no older than 25 at the time of death. Too young, many argue, for Akhenaten, who ruled for nearly 2 decades. Later studies proposed alternative candidates, including Smenkhkare, a shadowy figure who may have ruled briefly after Akhenaten's death. Still, the evidence remains inconclusive. Genetic testing in the 21st century added new layers to the puzzle. DNA extracted from the KV55 mummy revealed it was closely related to Tutankhamun, likely his father. This finding seemed to support the identification of the remains as Akhenaten, Tutankhamun's presumed father. But here, too, controversy persists. Some scholars question the interpretation of the genetic data, noting issues with sample preservation and contamination. Others argue that the data might fit another close male relative, leaving the question tantalizingly unresolved. Beyond the identity of the occupant lies the deeper mystery of the tomb itself. Why was it so modest, so hastily arranged? Why were the artifacts within a mixture of royal splendor and signs of deliberate desecration? The coffin's faceplate had been ripped away. The mummy's body showed evidence of damage and careless handling. Was this a burial of respect hurriedly conducted during a period of political chaos? Or was it an act of humiliation, a final attempt to erase a disgraced ruler from memory? The context of the Amarna period casts a long shadow over KV55. After Akhenaten's radical religious reforms collapsed, Egypt sought to restore the old gods and erase the heretical legacy of Atenism. Could KV55 represent the state's ambivalence toward the Amarna kings, acknowledging their royal blood but stripping them of honor? Some believe the tomb was originally intended as a temporary repository, a place to hide remains while the regime decided what to do with them. Others speculate that KV55 was a symbolic burial, deliberately incomplete, meant to deny its occupant the full rights of the afterlife. And then there are the more speculative ideas. Some fringe theories suggest KV555 holds not Akhenaten nor Smenkhkare, but an unknown figure whose identity was intentionally concealed, perhaps even a secret co-ruler or an unrecognized heir. Others point to the eerie coincidences: the tomb's proximity to Tutankhamun's own burial, the erasures on the coffin, and the mingling of artifacts from multiple royal individuals. Were these clues of a deeper story, a hidden struggle for power within Egypt's most enigmatic dynasty? Standing within KV55 today, one is struck by its starkness. The walls are bare, the air heavy with the stillness of centuries. The artifacts that once lay here now reside in museums, but the questions they raised remain unanswered. Who was the man interred in this unassuming chamber? Was he a king, a traitor, a victim of political vengeance, or all three? The Valley of the Kings holds many secrets, but KV-5 feels different, as if it was meant to confound us. Perhaps, buried within the sands of the Amarna period's collapse, there are still pieces of the puzzle waiting to be unearthed. Documents, inscriptions, or even another tomb that could rewrite the story we think we know. Until then, KV-5 stands as a silent witness to a chapter of Egyptian history defined by ambition, upheaval, and erasure. And as the desert night descends over the valley, one cannot help but wonder, whose voice is missing from these stones, and what might it tell us if only we could hear it? The desert east of the Nile stretches wide and empty, its silence broken only by the low whisper of wind across the sands. Here, at a bend in the river, the limestone cliffs rise like pale guardians over a landscape of ruins. This is Amarna, once the dazzling capital of Pharaoh Akhenaten, now a ghost city. Its streets, once alive with processions and worshippers of the Aten, the sun disk, lie buried in dust. The temples that once blazed in open-air splendor under Egypt's relentless sun are now little more than scattered foundations. And the question that lingers over this desolate site remains as haunting as the ruins themselves. Why did it all end so suddenly? Founded in the mid-14th century BC, Amarna, then called Akhenaten, the horizon of the Aten, was unlike any other city in Egypt. Akhenaten built it as the center of his radical religious revolution, abandoning Thebes and the worship of Egypt's traditional gods in favor of a single deity, the Aten. For nearly 2 decades, this city flourished. It had wide boulevards, palaces adorned with vibrant frescoes, and temples open to the sky, reflecting Akhenaten's vision of a world bathed in sunlight and free from the shadowed sanctuaries of the old gods. And then, almost as quickly as it had risen, Amarna was abandoned. Within a generation, its people were gone, its temples deserted, and its name erased from official records. What happened? The conventional explanation is that Amarna collapsed in the aftermath of Akhenaten's death. His religious reforms had alienated powerful factions, especially the influential priesthood of Amun, whose wealth and authority he had dismantled. After his passing, Egypt's rulers, seeking stability, restored the old gods and returned to Thebes. Amarna, a symbol of heresy, was abandoned as the country sought to erase the memory of the Atenist experiment. But while this explanation satisfies political logic, it leaves gaps. Why was the city abandoned so completely, so thoroughly, that even its building stones were stripped for reuse elsewhere? Why do archaeological excavations reveal signs of abrupt departure, unfinished buildings, discarded tools, and evidence that daily life simply ceased? And why, even as later pharaohs defaced Akhenaten's monuments, do we find so few records detailing the end of his city? Some scholars point to possible crises beyond politics. Excavations at Amarna have uncovered cemeteries filled with individuals, men, women, and children, bearing signs of malnutrition and disease. Could famine or plague have devastated the city's population, hastening its fall? Letters from the period, preserved in the Amarna archives, speak of desperate appeals for aid from foreign vassals as Egypt's influence waned. Was Amarna undone by a combination of internal revolt and external pressures, its utopian dream collapsing under the weight of reality? Others see more enigmatic factors at play. The suddenness of Amarna's abandonment has inspired theories ranging from natural disaster to deliberate obliteration. Could an earthquake have struck, damaging the city beyond repair? Or did the succeeding regime not merely abandon Amarna but actively destroy it, wiping it from memory as a warning against future rulers who might challenge Egypt's religious order? And then there are those who venture into more speculative realms. Some suggest that Akhenaten's Atenism was not merely a political ploy, but the product of esoteric knowledge, an understanding of cosmic or spiritual truths that threatened the entrenched powers of his time. In this view, the obliteration of Amarna was not just the end of a failed experiment, but the deliberate suppression of ideas deemed too dangerous to survive. Standing among the ruins today, one can still trace the outlines of Akhenaten's vision. The great temple of the Aten with its once open courts, the royal road that cut through the heart of the city, the remains of palaces where Nefertiti and their daughters would have walked. The desert has reclaimed much, but the scale of what once stood here is unmistakable. And yet, as you look across the empty landscape, it is hard to imagine that this was ever a thriving capital, a city built to celebrate light, now lost in shadow. What truly ended Amarna? Was it the inevitable consequence of political backlash, a catastrophic collapse from within, or the erasure of something we still do not fully understand? The cliffs above the site hold rock-cut tombs intended for Akhenaten's courtiers, their walls carved with scenes of devotion to the Aten. Many are unfinished, the work abruptly halted. Did the artisans simply lay down their tools one day and never return? The desert does not answer. It keeps its silence as it always has, its winds smoothing over the traces of a city that dared to defy tradition. Somewhere beneath the sand, perhaps, lies the key to Amarna's fate, a final piece of evidence waiting to be uncovered. Until then, we are left with ruins and questions, and with the unsettling realization that even the grandest visions can vanish almost overnight. What was lost here in this city of light turned to dust. And if we find the answer, will it change how we see not only Amarna, but the very nature of power, belief, and the fragile dreams of civilization? The mortuary temple of Ramses III at Medinet Habu still rises proudly on the west bank of the Nile, its towering pylons adorned with scenes of battle and triumph. Carved into the stone are depictions of the pharaoh smiting his enemies, leading Egypt to victory against the Sea Peoples, and presiding over a kingdom that stood as one of the last great powers of the New Kingdom era. The walls speak of strength and invincibility. And yet, behind this facade of power, the final days of Ramses III tell a far darker story. One of betrayal, conspiracy, and a death shrouded in mystery for over 3 millennia. Ramses III reigned from 1186 to 1155 BC, a time when Egypt faced internal strife and external threats. His rule is often seen as the last significant peak of Egypt's imperial glory, marked by successful defenses of the land against foreign invasions. But beneath this image of stability, cracks had begun to form. Economic troubles, labor strikes, and political intrigue simmered beneath the surface of his reign. And in the twilight of his life, these tensions erupted violently. The first clues to this hidden drama come not from his tomb, but from papyri found centuries later, the judicial papyrus of Turin and related documents. These texts record what has come to be known as the Harem Conspiracy, a plot orchestrated from within the royal household itself. At its center was a secondary queen, Tiye, and her son, Pentauer, who sought to overthrow Ramses III and place Pentauer on the throne. The papyri detail a network of officials, servants, and magicians implicated in the scheme, a conspiracy so audacious it reached into the very heart of the palace. But did they succeed? For generations, historians debated whether Ramses III died peacefully or fell victim to the plot. His mummy, discovered in 1886 in the royal cache of Deir el-Bahari, seemed to offer no immediate clues. Unlike many pharaohs, His remains were remarkably well preserved, with no obvious signs of violence visible to the naked eye. Some scholars argued this supported the idea that he survived the conspiracy and died of natural causes. Others suspected the opposite, that the text's descriptions of a coup hinted at a regicide obscured by official silence. The truth began to emerge only with modern technology. In 2012, CT scans of Ramses III's mummy revealed a devastating wound, a deep gash across his throat, likely inflicted with a sharp blade. The cut was so severe that it would have caused immediate death. Tucked within his wrappings near the wound was an amulet of the Eye of Horus, a symbol of healing and protection, as if the embalmers themselves had tried to restore what had been violently taken. This discovery confirmed what the papyri had long implied. Ramses III had been murdered. Yet even this revelation opens as many questions as it answers. Who struck the fatal blow? Was it delivered during the coup attempt itself, perhaps in the chaos of a palace uprising? Or was the pharaoh executed in secret by those closest to him, ensuring that the transition of power could be controlled? The fate of Pentawere, the prince at the center of the plot, adds another layer of intrigue. Among the mummies found in Deir el-Bahari was one that came to be known as the Unknown Man E, a body with a contorted expression, mouth agape, buried in a sheepskin, a sign of dishonor. DNA analysis has linked him to the family of Ramses III, likely as his son. Could this be Pentawere, punished after the failed coup, forced to take his own life or executed? The evidence suggests so, but the story is far from complete. Speculative theories have also emerged around Ramses III's death. Some scholars suggest that the conspiracy may have been more than a simple struggle for power. Was it a reaction to deeper crises in Egypt, famine, corruption, or discontent among powerful elites? Could Tiye and her allies have been part of a broader movement to reshape the throne itself, one that ultimately failed? Others wonder whether Ramses III's assassination marked not just the end of a king, but the beginning of the end for the new kingdom, a turning point from which Egypt never fully recovered. Even the manner in which his death was concealed raises questions. Why did official records remain silent about the king's murder? Was it to maintain the illusion of divine kingship, to hide the fact that a god on earth could be struck down by mortal hands? Or was it to protect the legitimacy of his successor, Ramses IV, who may have ascended to power amid the chaos of his father's assassination? Standing before the mummy of Ramses III today, displayed in Cairo's National Museum of Egyptian Civilization, it is hard to reconcile the lifeless figure with the grandeur of the king depicted on the walls of Medinet Habu. His reign ended not in the glory of a warrior pharaoh, but in silence, his throat cut by those he trusted most. And yet, even in death, he leaves behind a story as compelling as any carved in stone. Did Ramses III's death seal the fate of an empire already in decline? Was it the final blow in a drama of ambition and betrayal, or one chapter in a longer story of Egypt's inexorable fall? The answers lie buried still, perhaps in texts yet to be unearthed, or in tombs whose secrets have not been revealed. As the sun sets behind the cliffs of Thebes, casting long shadows over the temples and tombs of Egypt's kings, the question lingers in the twilight. What truly happened in those final moments of Ramses III's life? And what does it tell us about the fragility of even the mightiest of rulers? In a dimly lit chamber of the Egyptian Museum in Cairo lies a mummy whose story is written not in hieroglyphs, but in wounds. The face of Pharaoh Seqenenre Tao, ruler of Thebes in the late 17th dynasty, stares out with a frozen grimace, mouth open, teeth bared, as though caught in a moment of agony. His skull bears deep, violent gashes, crushing blows to the forehead, a massive wound near the ear, a strike to the cheekbone so forceful it shattered the bone. His hands are stiff, fingers clenched, as if in a final, futile attempt to ward off the assault. For over 3,000 years, his death has remained one of ancient Egypt's most haunting mysteries. Seqenenre Tao ruled during a time of crisis, around 1558 to 1553 BC, when Egypt was divided between native rulers in the south and the Hyksos, foreign kings who controlled the north. The Hyksos, based in their capital of Avaris in the eastern Nile Delta, had brought new technologies to Egypt, horse-drawn chariots, advanced weaponry, and dominated the country for generations. Seqenenre's reign marked the beginning of the struggle to expel them, a conflict that would eventually lead to Egypt's reunification under his descendants. But was he a martyr of that war? Or a victim of something far more complex? The condition of his body has long fueled speculation. Unlike other royal mummies, Seqenenre's was poorly embalmed. His brain was left inside his skull, his torso barely treated, and his body shows signs of rapid decomposition at the time of burial. Why would a pharaoh, supposedly the divine ruler of the south, receive such undignified treatment? The most common explanation is that he died far from Thebes, perhaps on the battlefield, and his body was hastily prepared upon its return. But if that is true, how exactly did he die? Examination of his injuries suggests a brutal, face-to-face encounter. Modern CT scans have identified wounds from multiple weapons: an axe, a dagger, a spear-like blade, all delivered to the head. Some researchers argue these were Hyksos weapons, indicating that Seqenenre was captured and executed by his enemies, possibly in a public display of power. Was he struck down in battle and finished off on the field, or was he taken alive, humiliated, and murdered as a warning to those who opposed foreign rule? Others propose a more nuanced scenario. The pattern of the injuries suggests he may have been restrained, his hands bound, while his captors delivered the fatal blows. If so, this was not an ordinary death in combat, but an execution. Was he betrayed by his own allies and handed over to the Hyksos? Or did he willingly sacrifice himself, a symbolic act to ignite the rebellion that his sons would later complete? There are even more speculative ideas. Some suggest the Hyksos themselves may not have been solely responsible. Could Seqenenre have fallen victim to internal politics within Thebes? A coup disguised as a casualty of war? The rushed embalming and lack of ceremonial care might support this darker possibility, that his death was as much about domestic power struggles as foreign conquest. The scant historical record offers little clarity. A later text, the tale of Apophis and Seqenenre, depicts a verbal exchange between Seqenenre and the Hyksos king Apophis, in which Apophis demands the impossible, ordering the removal of noisy hippopotami in Thebes to disturb his sleep hundreds of miles away. The story is likely fictional, a piece of propaganda casting the Hyksos as arrogant tyrants and Seqenenre as the defiant leader. But does it hint at a real tension that led to his death? Or is it part of a legend that obscures the true events? Standing before his remains today, the violence of his end is almost palpable. The wounds tell of rage, of close-quarters brutality, and of a death that was anything but peaceful. His sacrifice, whether forced or chosen, was not in vain. His sons Kamose and Ahmose would continue the fight, eventually driving the Hyksos from Egypt and founding the powerful 18th dynasty. And yet, the details of Seqenenre's final moments remain locked in silence. Was he a fallen warrior who died bravely in battle, a captive executed by his enemies, or a ruler undone by treachery within his own ranks? Did his death mark the turning point of Egypt's liberation, or was it simply one tragedy among many in a brutal era of conflict? The desert that once witnessed his struggle has long since swallowed the battlefields, and the Hyksos capital of Avaris lies buried beneath centuries of Nile silt. Perhaps somewhere beneath those layers of earth is the missing piece, a record, a weapon, or even the site of his execution. Until it is found, Seqenenre remains a riddle carved into bone, a king whose death is as mysterious as the dawn of the empire it helped to create. And so the question lingers, as persistent as the desert wind. What truly happened to the pharaoh whose final scream still seems to echo across 3 millennia of silence? Beneath the rugged cliffs of western Thebes, the Valley of the Kings lies in solemn silence. By day, the sun scorches the limestone peaks. By night, the desert cools and the stars cast their ancient light over a place meant to be eternal. Here, Egypt's most powerful rulers were entombed, hidden chambers filled with treasures and spells designed to secure their journey to the afterlife. Yet behind this facade of sacred inviolability lurks a darker truth. Many of these tombs were plundered, sometimes within mere decades of their sealing. The New Kingdom, often remembered as a golden age of Egypt's wealth and empire, was also a time of shocking betrayal, tomb robbery on a scale that undermined the very foundations of pharaonic power. The evidence is stark. Archaeologists excavating the valley have uncovered desecrated chambers, shattered coffins, and mummies stripped of their finery. Royal burials once brimming with gold and ritual objects were found ransacked, their treasures gone, their sanctity violated. How could such acts have occurred in a society that revered the divine king, that believed disturbing the dead could bring eternal damnation? The answers, as preserved in ancient documents, are as fascinating as they are troubling. The Abbott Papyrus and the Amherst Papyrus, dating to the reign of Ramses XIX in the 12th century BC, provide rare glimpses into official investigations of tomb robberies. These texts read like criminal case files, lists of stolen goods, confessions wrung from suspects, and accounts of trials held before high-ranking officials. They reveal networks of thieves that included not only common laborers and bandits, but also guards, necropolis workers, and, in some cases, state officials themselves. The very people entrusted with protecting the dead often became their violators. But why? Some historians argue that these crimes were driven by desperation. By the late New Kingdom, Egypt faced economic decline, famine, and political instability. The royal tombs, brimming with gold and wealth, became irresistible targets for those struggling to survive. Others see these acts as symptoms of a deeper societal shift, a weakening of central authority, the erosion of religious awe, and a growing willingness to exploit even the sacred for personal gain. Still, the sheer scale and brazenness of some robberies suggest more than opportunism. Consider the case of tombs systematically looted of their most valuable contents while leaving less portable items behind. Such precision implies organization, knowledge of tomb layouts, and possibly inside information. Could elements of the state itself have sanctioned or turned a blind eye to these acts? The discovery of reburial caches, like those at Deir el-Bahari in the Valley of the Kings, hints at an official response to widespread plundering. Priests of the 21st dynasty gathered royal mummies from violated tombs and hid them in secret locations to protect what remained. Was this merely an act of piety, or also a cover-up to conceal the extent of the desecration under their watch? Speculative theories go further still. Some propose that certain tombs were never fully stocked to begin with, that the treasures promised to the king for eternity were siphoned off even before burial, diverted into the coffers of a strained state. Others suggest that the robberies might have been part of ritual practices we no longer understand, symbolic acts intended to transfer the king's power or wealth to the living. Walking through the valley today, past the silent entrances carved into the rock, it is difficult to imagine the scenes these investigations describe. The tomb of Ramses VI, with its vivid ceilings of stars and gods, was once a place of eternal rest. Was it also, in the dark of night, a scene of chaos? Lamps flickering as intruders pried open sarcophagi and stripped divine kings of their treasures. The mummies themselves sometimes bear witness. Many, when discovered in modern times, showed signs of ancient tampering, broken limbs, missing amulets, hurried rewrappings. In some cases, inscriptions on coffins had been erased or altered, perhaps to obscure the identities of those once interred with royal honors. Were these the acts of common thieves, or the hand of an elite determined to rewrite the past? The tomb robberies of the New Kingdom force us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Even in a civilization that built monuments to eternity, nothing was truly secure. The Valley of the Kings, designed to hide and protect, became instead a battleground between reverence and greed, memory and erasure. And yet, despite the devastation, mysteries remain. Not all the treasures have been accounted for. Not all the tombs have been found. Somewhere beneath the sands of Thebes may lie untouched chambers, still holding the wealth and secrets of Egypt's long-dead kings. Will these undiscovered tombs reveal the full extent of the betrayal, or rewrite our understanding of how the ancients viewed death and the afterlife? The desert keeps its silence, just as it has for millennia. But beneath its surface, the story of Egypt's lost eternity waits, reminding us that even in a land obsessed with immortality, the past can be stolen and the truth can remain buried. The ruins of Amarna lie quiet beneath the unrelenting Egyptian sun, stone foundations tracing the outlines of vanished temples, palaces, and streets. Among these skeletal remains once walked figures who shaped one of the most controversial chapters in Egypt's history. And among them, perhaps the most enigmatic of all, was Pharaoh Smenkhkare. Today, his name barely lingers in the fragmented records of the late Amarna period. He appeared suddenly, ruled briefly, and then vanished without explanation, leaving scholars to piece together a puzzle from tantalizing fragments. Who was Smenkhkare, and why did he disappear? The historical record offers little certainty. Smenkhkare is believed to have ascended the throne near the end of Akhenaten's reign in the 14th century BC, during a time of immense upheaval. Akhenaten's radical monotheistic revolution, the worship of the Aten, had upended centuries of religious tradition, weakened Egypt's political alliances, and alienated its powerful priesthood. In this turbulent context, Smenkhkare emerges in inscriptions and artifacts, but always at the edges of history, like a shadow moving just beyond the light. A few depictions show him alongside Akhenaten, sometimes in ceremonial scenes, crowned as a co-regent. Yet these are rare and ambiguous. Was he Akhenaten's son, a younger brother, or a son-in-law married to the famous queen Nefertiti, or one of Akhenaten's daughters? The evidence is contradictory. Some inscriptions call him Ankh-Keperure Smenkhkare Djoser Keperu, a throne name suggesting royal authority. Others seem to merge his identity with that of Neferneferuaten, a ruler who may have been Nefertiti herself. Could Smenkhkare and Neferneferuaten be the same person, an individual who reigned under different names? Or were they two distinct rulers whose reigns overlapped in a confusing succession? Then there is the question of his fate. After a handful of appearances in the historical record, Smenkhkare vanishes entirely. No tomb has been definitively identified as his. No inscriptions mark his burial. No funerary goods bear his undisturbed name. In a civilization that obsessed over preserving the memory of its kings for eternity, such erasure is striking. Mainstream historians offer several explanations. Some believe Smenkhkare died young, perhaps from illness. The Amarna period was rife with evidence of plague, and sudden deaths may have been common. Others suggest he was simply a transitional figure, a placeholder pharaoh whose brief rule ended when Tutankhamun, likely his successor, ascended the throne and restored the old gods. In this view, Smenkhkare's memory may have been intentionally suppressed as part of the wider erasure of the Amarna experiment. Yet these explanations do not account for all the inconsistencies. If he were merely a short-lived ruler, why do we find so few definitive traces of him at all? Why is his name often found in contexts suggesting alteration, cartouches erased or reinscribed, titles modified? Was this more than posthumous neglect? Was it deliberate? Some scholars see in Smenkhkare's disappearance the signs of a deeper conflict, perhaps a struggle for power at the heart of the Amarna court. Was he overthrown by rival factions loyal to Nefertiti, or to the emerging figure of Tutankhamun? Or did he represent a compromise candidate installed by those seeking to stabilize Egypt as Akhenaten's religious revolution faltered, only to be quietly removed when he outlived his usefulness? Speculative theories push even further. Some suggest Smenkhkare may never have been a distinct individual at all, that he was a throne name adopted by Nefertiti herself when she assumed power after Akhenaten's death. In this interpretation, the disappearance of Smenkhkare is simply the result of historical misidentification, a ghost created by the complex and politically charged succession of the time. Others wonder if his memory was deliberately expunged, not merely for political reasons, but because he embodied a compromise between competing ideologies, a ruler too closely tied to a failed vision of Egypt's divine order. Amid all this uncertainty stands one potential clue: the tomb known as KV55 in the Valley of the Kings, discovered in 1907. Inside were fragments of funerary equipment linked to the Amarna royal family, and a poorly preserved mummy whose identity remains debated. Some argue this is Smenkhkare, while others believe it to be Akhenaten himself. Genetic testing has shown the KV55 individual to be closely related to Tutankhamun, likely his father or uncle. But even this has not ended the debate. If KV55 does hold Smenkhkare, why was his burial so modest, his memory so obscured? And if it is not him, then where is the true resting place of this elusive pharaoh? Standing among the ruins of Amarna today, the silence feels almost deliberate, as if the city itself conspires to keep its secrets. The sun-bleached stones speak of a bold experiment in faith and power, but the fate of those who lived and ruled here, Akhenaten, Nefertiti, and Smenkhkare, remains clouded by uncertainty. Did Smenkhkare die quietly in the shadows of history, a casualty of circumstance? Or was he erased by design, his story buried as deeply as the city that once bore witness to his reign? The desert offers no answers. It keeps its counsel, as it has for millennia. Somewhere, perhaps in a tomb yet unopened or a fragment of text still buried in the sands, lies the key to Smenkhkare's fate. Until then, we are left with fragments and questions, and with the enduring mystery of a pharaoh who stepped briefly into the light, only to vanish back into darkness. What truth lies behind his disappearance? And when it is finally uncovered, will it illuminate the end of an era, or reveal a story far more complex than we have ever imagined? In the ruins of Amarna, where the sun beats relentlessly upon crumbling stone and the desert wind scatters fine dust across once busy streets, a name lingers faintly in the historical record, fading, elusive, like a ghost on the threshold of memory. Neferneferuaten, a pharaoh who may have ruled Egypt during one of its most turbulent periods, yet whose reign remains so poorly understood that some question whether it truly existed at all. Was Neferneferuaten a woman, a man, or a title worn briefly by more than one ruler? And why has history left behind only fragments of this mysterious figure? The known traces are sparse but intriguing. The name Ankheperure Neferneferuaten appears on a handful of artifacts, sometimes alongside titles that suggest royal authority, other times paired with feminine epithets, beloved of Akhenaten, effective for her husband. These suggest a ruler who may have emerged in the wake of Akhenaten's death during the chaotic final years of the Amarna period in the 14th century BC. But who was this person? One leading theory identifies Neferneferuaten as Nefertiti, Akhenaten's famous queen. As the great royal wife, Nefertiti played a prominent public role during his reign, appearing in reliefs performing rituals typically reserved for kings. Some scholars believe that after Akhenaten's death, she assumed the throne in her own right, ruling as a female pharaoh under the name Neferneferuaten. This would not have been unprecedented. Hatshepsut had done the same centuries earlier. Yet if Nefertiti truly ruled Egypt as Neferneferuaten, why is the evidence so tenuous? Why do later records omit her entirely, as if her reign had been deliberately erased? Another theory suggests that Neferneferuaten was not Nefertiti at all, but one of Akhenaten's daughters, perhaps Meketaten, who may have married her own father late in his reign and then taken up the mantle of kingship after his death. Some inscriptions hint at a female ruler bearing the name Meketaten in combination with royal titles. If true, this would suggest a dynastic experiment so radical, and perhaps so scandalous, that it was quickly buried by those who sought to restore traditional order. Still others propose that Neferneferuaten was a male ruler entirely, possibly Smenkhkare, whose name was later conflated or altered in the historical record. The confusion stems from overlapping throne names and the habit of reusing royal titles, a practice that has left modern scholars grappling with layers of modification and erasure. Was Neferneferuaten a distinct ruler whose identity has been obscured by centuries of political rewriting, or simply a phantom created by misinterpretation? The context of the time only deepens the mystery. The Amarna period was a time of immense instability. Akhenaten's religious revolution, centered on the worship of the Aten, had dismantled the power of the traditional gods and priesthood. With his death, Egypt stood at a crossroads. Should the Atenist experiment continue, or should the old order be restored? Neferneferuaten's brief reign, whatever its true nature, appears to have been a transitional moment, an attempt either to preserve Akhenaten's vision or to guide Egypt back from the brink of collapse. But the lack of definitive evidence leaves us wondering, was this ruler overthrown, their memory intentionally erased as part of the backlash against Amarna? Some artifacts provide tantalizing hints. A golden shrine from Tutankhamun's tomb bears inscriptions that seem to have been altered, originally naming Neferneferuaten, later reworked to reference Tutankhamun himself. Was this an attempt to reclaim objects from a predecessor whose legacy was being dismantled? And if so, does this suggest that Neferneferuaten's reign was seen as illegitimate by those who followed? Speculative theories go further still. Some researchers argue that the erasure of Neferneferuaten reflects more than political expediency. It was the suppression of a ruler who embodied the last remnants of Akhenaten's radical vision. Could this ruler have been a fervent adherent of the Aten, fighting to preserve a dying religion in the face of overwhelming opposition? Or did Neferneferuaten represent a compromise figure caught between factions, doomed to vanish once either side gained the upper hand? Standing amid the ruins of Amarna today, the absence is palpable. This was once a city of light, built to honor the sun itself, yet so much of its story lies in shadow. The name Neferneferuaten appears here and there, on a ring, a fragment of a stela, a faint trace in the dust of time. And then, like the city itself, it disappears. Was Neferneferuaten a queen who ruled as king, a daughter thrust onto the throne, or a construct of later confusion? Was their reign an act of defiance, a desperate bid to hold on to a vision of the world that was collapsing, or simply a fleeting moment lost in the storm of history? The desert offers no answers. It swallows names, cities, and lives alike, leaving us to piece together echoes. Somewhere, perhaps, lies a tomb that could resolve the mystery, a burial untouched, bearing the cartouches of Neferneferuaten in full glory. Or perhaps the truth has been lost forever, erased as deliberately as the name itself. And so we are left with questions. Who was Neferneferuaten? And what might their story reveal about the final, fragile days of a revolution that dared to remake Egypt and then vanished into silence? The cliffs of the Valley of the Kings stand silent against the desert sky, their ochre faces bathed in the waning light of dusk. Deep within these cliffs lies a tomb once prepared for a powerful woman, a queen who became pharaoh in her own right at the close of Egypt's 19th dynasty. Her name was Twosret, and like the fading sun over Thebes, her reign ended in darkness. What followed was not simply the death of a ruler, but the erasure of a legacy. Twosret's disappearance from the historical record remains one of the most enigmatic episodes in ancient Egyptian history. Twosret began her journey as great royal wife to Seti II, a pharaoh of considerable power. After his death, she served as regent for his young successor, Siptah, ruling on his behalf until he came of age. When Siptah died unexpectedly, still in his teens, Twosret assumed full kingship, adopting the regalia and titles of a pharaoh. Like Hatshepsut before her, she stood as a woman wielding ultimate authority in a male-dominated institution. For a brief time, she ruled Egypt as its sovereign, and then she vanished. The exact circumstances of Twosret's fall are lost to time. Official records after her reign make almost no mention of her. Inscriptions bearing her name were erased or replaced by those of her successor, Smenkhkare, founder of the 20th dynasty. Her lavish tomb, KV-14, in the Valley of the Kings, a grand structure initially begun for her as queen and later expanded for her as pharaoh, was usurped. Its walls were recarved to honor Smenkhkare instead. What happened to Twosret herself, her burial, her body, her memory, remains a mystery. Mainstream historians suggest she was overthrown in a coup. Egypt at the time was plagued by political instability, internal corruption, and economic strain. Smenkhkare's rise to power may have been the result of a factional struggle that ended Twosret's rule and sought to obliterate all traces of her authority. Yet the lack of concrete evidence leaves much open to interpretation. Was her downfall violent, or did she die naturally, only for her legacy to be erased by those who followed? Some scholars see in her disappearance echoes of deliberate damnatio memoriae, the intentional erasure of a ruler's name to strip them of power in this world and the next. If so, what threat did Twosret pose to her successors that warranted such obliteration? Did she represent a competing royal lineage, a dangerous claim to legitimacy that Smenkhkare sought to destroy? Or was she simply a casualty of a chaotic era, her memory sacrificed to stabilize a fractured kingdom? Speculative theories delve deeper into the silence. Some propose that Twosret's rule was marked by alliances and rivalries we have yet to uncover, that her position as a female pharaoh in a period of unrest may have made her a target for both political and religious factions. Others point to the curious absence of her burial remains. Could she still lie hidden in an undiscovered tomb, perhaps buried in secret by loyalists? Or was her body destroyed as part of a systematic attempt to erase her completely from history? The physical traces of Twosret's reign add to the intrigue. Her cartouches, where they survive, show signs of alteration. Her statues are rare, many found broken or defaced. Even her tomb bears witness to this contested legacy. Original decorations depicting her as pharaoh were chiseled away, replaced by images of Seqenenre and the gods he served. It is as if her very existence was rewritten, and yet the erasures could not fully succeed. Fragments of her story endure, inscriptions in remote temples, artifacts bearing her name, and the sheer architectural ambition of KV-14 itself. These remnants suggest a woman of authority and vision, whose reign, however brief, left a mark too deep to be completely expunged. Standing today before the entrance of KV-14, with the desert wind whispering through the valley, one cannot help but wonder, what truly happened to Twosret? Was she a usurper undone by the rightful heir of a new dynasty, or a legitimate ruler erased by those who seized her throne? Did she die in quiet resignation, or in a violent struggle for power that has been buried along with her name? The Valley of the Kings keeps its secrets well. Somewhere, perhaps deep within the earth, there may still rest the answer, a hidden burial untouched, or a forgotten inscription telling the final chapter of her life. Until it is found, Twosret remains a ghost of Egypt's past, a queen who became pharaoh, only to disappear into the silence of history. What truths lie concealed in the sands of Thebes? And when they are finally revealed, will they restore the voice of a woman who once ruled Egypt, or confirm that some legacies are meant to remain in shadow? The Theban plain stretches wide beneath the relentless Egyptian sun, its horizon broken by the jagged limestone cliffs that have guarded the secrets of ancient dynasties for millennia. Amid these timeless landscapes lies a site of staggering significance, one that for centuries was thought to have vanished entirely, the so-called Lost Golden City of Amenhotep III. Hidden beneath layers of sand and silence for over 3,000 years, its sudden reappearance in the modern era has rekindled fascination with one of Egypt's most enigmatic periods. Yet even as archaeologists unearth its streets, walls, and artifacts, questions linger. What really happened to this city, and why did it vanish so completely from history? The city, located near Luxor on the west bank of the Nile, dates to the reign of Amenhotep III, often considered one of Egypt's most powerful and prosperous pharaohs. Around 1390 to 1352 BC, Amenhotep III presided over an empire at its zenith, a realm enriched by trade, diplomacy, and monumental building projects. This golden age produced temples like Luxor and Karnak, colossal statues of the king himself, and a culture steeped in opulence and divine kingship. The city discovered in 2021 appears to have been the beating heart of that golden world, a sprawling urban center with mud brick houses, workshops, bakeries, and storerooms still filled with everyday objects, pottery, jewelry molds, and tools, as if its inhabitants had left in haste. Why, then, did such a vital city disappear without a trace for more than 3 millennia? Mainstream archaeology offers a straightforward hypothesis. After Amenhotep III's death, his son, Akhenaten, ushered in one of the most radical religious and cultural revolutions in Egyptian history. Abandoning the pantheon of traditional gods, Akhenaten elevated the sun disk Aten as the sole deity and founded a new capital far to the north at Amarna. The shift in political and religious focus likely left this once thriving city abandoned, its importance eclipsed by the demands of a new regime. In time, the sands of the desert covered what remained, preserving it in silence. But the evidence unearthed beneath the earth tells a more complicated story. Excavations have revealed signs that the city was not simply abandoned. It may have experienced a sudden, dramatic departure. Rooms were left as if people had fled, jewelry half-finished, tools lying in mid-use, food production halted abruptly. Pottery bearing the seal of Amenhotep III was found alongside later objects linked to his son Akhenaten, suggesting the city remained active even during the early years of the so-called Amarna period. If that is the case, why did its occupants ultimately vanish? Was it political upheaval, environmental catastrophe, Something else entirely? Some researchers propose a connection to the Amarna revolution itself. Did resistance to Akhenaten's monotheistic reforms lead to conflict here? Could the city have been purged of its loyalists to the old gods as the new cult of Aten spread? Others wonder whether economic or environmental pressures played a role. Ancient records hint at periods of famine and plague during the late 18th dynasty. Could disease have struck this urban hub, prompting its sudden evacuation? More speculative theories reach beyond the tangible evidence. There are whispers of this city being more than a mere industrial and administrative hub. Some suggest it might have been tied to the elaborate mortuary cult of Amenhotep III, a sacred space linked to rituals and treasures meant to secure the king's divine status in the afterlife. If so, did its treasures tempt looters, leading to its violent end? Or did later rulers deliberately erase it from memory to distance themselves from a past they no longer wished to acknowledge? The artifacts themselves deepen the enigma. Seals and inscriptions bearing Amenhotep III's royal cartouche are abundant, but curious absences remain. There is little evidence of the city's final days. No clear signs of battle, no mass graves, no comprehensive records explaining its abandonment. It is as though history itself conspired to erase its last chapter. Standing amid the exposed walls today, one can almost imagine the hum of life that once filled these streets. The rhythmic pounding of artisans shaping gold ornaments for the pharaoh's court. The laughter of children running between narrow alleyways. The fragrance of bread baking in communal ovens. All of it now silent, preserved only in fragments of mud brick and pottery. What does the lost golden city of Amenhotep III truly represent? A symbol of Egypt at the height of its power? A casualty of religious upheaval? Or a secret deliberately buried, waiting millennia to resurface? As archaeologists continue to peel back layers of sand, each discovery brings us closer to understanding, and yet, paradoxically, deepens the mystery. How could a city so vital simply vanish from collective memory, even as its rulers' monuments still tower across the Nile Valley? Did later generations seek to forget it, or did the desert merely hide what human memory lost? The answers may lie still beneath the earth, waiting for the right hands to uncover them. Or perhaps some mysteries resist resolution, reminding us that even in a land as meticulously documented as ancient Egypt, the past can remain elusive. What other cities, temples, or stories sleep beneath the sands of Thebes, unknown to us today? And when they awaken, what truths or further questions will they bring? Beneath the shifting sands of Saqqara, where the desert stretches endlessly under a pale, unyielding sky, rises one of the oldest monuments of human ingenuity, the Step Pyramid of Djoser. Constructed over 4,600 years ago, around 2667 to 2648 BC, this towering limestone edifice stands not as a smooth-sided pyramid like those of Giza, but as a series of 6 receding steps, each one a monumental layer in the story of Egypt's architectural evolution. It is more than a tomb. It is a statement of permanence, a bold declaration of power and divine connection from Egypt's third dynasty. Yet, within its ancient corridors and beneath its solid mass lies a secret that continues to puzzle archaeologists and historians alike, an intricate network of underground chambers whose purpose remains shrouded in mystery. To the untrained eye, the step pyramid appears to be a simple structure, but beneath its weathered exterior lies a labyrinth of tunnels, shafts, and passageways stretching for miles, cut deep into the bedrock. Over 5 kilometers of underground galleries spiral beneath the monument, connected by vertical shafts that drop into hidden voids. What was their purpose? Were they merely storage rooms for grave goods, or did they serve a more profound, possibly ritualistic function? The pyramid itself was commissioned by Pharaoh Djoser and designed by his chief architect, Imhotep, an enigmatic figure often credited with transforming Egyptian architecture. Imhotep's genius is evident here. The Step Pyramid was the first monumental stone building in history, a leap forward from the simple mastaba tombs that preceded it. But some of its features defy easy explanation. When early explorers first ventured into the pyramid's depths in the 19th century, they were met with an astonishing sight. Vast corridors lined with thousands of blue-green faience tiles, meticulously set into the walls to mimic reed matting, a material long associated with royalty and divine protection. Why decorate unseen underground chambers with such elaborate craftsmanship? Was it purely symbolic, intended for the eyes of gods rather than mortals? Or does it hint at ceremonies and practices now lost to time? At the heart of the complex lies a deep vertical shaft, nearly 28 meters long, descending into what is believed to have been Djoser's burial chamber. But curiously, no body was ever found. Fragments of a mummified foot, discovered in the early 20th century, are all that remain, if indeed they belong to Djoser at all. Could the pharaoh's remains have been removed in antiquity? Or was this pyramid never intended as his final resting place in the first place? Mainstream archaeology suggests that the underground galleries were intended to store offerings, treasures, and grave goods meant to accompany the king into the afterlife. Indeed, fragments of stone vessels, some inscribed with the names of earlier rulers, have been found within the complex, possibly repurposed as part of Djoser's own funerary provisions. But these explanations leave gaps. Why include hundreds of side chambers, some seemingly inaccessible? Why create a structure of such overwhelming complexity when simpler tombs had sufficed for centuries before? More speculative theories propose that these chambers served as ritual spaces, perhaps used for secret rites performed by the living in honor of the dead king. Others wonder whether the labyrinth had a defensive function, designed to confuse grave robbers, a common threat in ancient Egypt. Yet the sheer scale of the underground network suggests an ambition beyond mere security. Recent technological surveys have added further intrigue. Ground-penetrating radar and 3D scanning have hinted at possible voids beneath or adjacent to the pyramid, areas not yet excavated. Are these natural cavities, or intentional spaces created by Imhotep's builders? Could they contain undiscovered artifacts, perhaps even the true burial chamber of Djoser himself? Some researchers whisper of hidden chambers still sealed after millennia, holding secrets that might rewrite what we know about Egypt's earliest dynasties. And then there is Imhotep, the man behind the monument. Revered as a genius architect, physician, and eventually deified as a god of wisdom, Imhotep's role in the Step Pyramid has fueled speculation for generations. Was this complex merely a royal tomb, or was it also a repository of knowledge, a place where sacred wisdom was safeguarded for eternity? Some fringe theorists have gone as far as suggesting that the labyrinth beneath Djoser's pyramid once contained scrolls or artifacts of immense importance, later lost or deliberately concealed. While such ideas remain unproven, they underscore a fundamental truth. The Step Pyramid still guards mysteries that elude definitive answers. Standing at the entrance to the underground network today, one feels a palpable weight, the sense of a place deliberately crafted to outlast time itself. The air grows cooler as one descends, footsteps echoing against stone laid by hands long turned to dust. In the silence, questions seem to linger in the darkness. Who last walked these corridors with purpose? What rituals unfolded here under flickering torchlight? And what, if anything, still lies beyond the walls we have yet to breach? The Step Pyramid of Djoser is often called the beginning of Egypt's Pyramid Age, but perhaps it is also a reminder that every beginning holds secrets. We have explored its outer form, mapped its known chambers, and catalogued its artifacts, yet its core remains elusive. What did Imhotep intend for those who came after? What messages, what treasures, what truths might still lie waiting in the shadows below Saqqara? For all our advances in archaeology, for all the knowledge we have wrested from the sands of Egypt, this ancient monument continues to defy us. And maybe that is its greatest legacy, not just as a tomb, but as an eternal question carved into stone: what lies beneath? The desert sun casts long shadows across the necropolis of Saqqara, where the sands whisper of kings long forgotten and power struggles buried deep beneath the weight of millennia. Among these weathered tombs lies the modest pyramid of Pharaoh Teti, the first ruler of Egypt's 6th dynasty, a man whose reign was marked by innovation, ambition, and perhaps betrayal. His name, etched faintly into limestone walls, speaks of a king who sought to strengthen the throne by forging alliances and restructuring the power of Egypt's elite. Yet behind the facade of order lies a darker story: the possibility that this pharaoh met a violent end at the hands of those closest to him. Teti's reign began around 2345 BC, a period of transition following the grandeur of the 5th dynasty. He married into influential priestly families, consolidating ties with the powerful cults of the sun god Ra and other deities who dominated Egypt's religious landscape. His building projects were ambitious, though not as monumental as those of his predecessors, and he continued the practice of inscribing pyramid texts within his burial chambers, seeking eternal life through words carved in stone. To outward appearances, his rule was stable. But was this stability an illusion? What little we know of Teti's death comes from fragmented ancient records and the subtle hints left in archaeology. The Turin King List, an important papyrus from later centuries, records his reign as having ended abruptly. Later texts, like those of the historian Manetho, writing in the 3rd century BC, claim that Teti was assassinated by his own guards. But how much truth lies in these accounts? Were they factual reports or political propaganda shaped long after the events they describe? Teti's pyramid itself, though now little more than a ruin, holds silent clues. Beneath its collapsed exterior lies a burial chamber where archaeologists found his sarcophagus. But, intriguingly, no unambiguous evidence of his intact remains. Some suggest that his mummy may have been destroyed or desecrated in antiquity, perhaps deliberately. Was this an act of revenge, a final attempt to obliterate his memory, or simply the result of the tomb robberies that plagued Egypt for centuries? One theory holds that Teti's efforts to reduce the influence of powerful nobles and priestly factions may have sown seeds of discontent. His policies sought to centralize authority, potentially threatening the autonomy of regional governors, known as nomarchs, whose power had been growing. Did these elites conspire to end his life? The idea of a royal assassination is not without precedent in ancient Egypt. Court intrigues, coups, and violent struggles for succession punctuate its long history, even if they were often veiled in the language of divine will. Adding to the intrigue is the curious fate of Teti's son and successor, Pepi I. Some inscriptions suggest that Pepi faced rebellion early in his reign, perhaps from those who had opposed his father. Could Pepi's rise to power have been tainted by the same conspiracy that ended Teti's life? Or did Pepi himself play a role in removing his father to secure the throne? The evidence is frustratingly inconclusive. Archaeologists and Egyptologists have searched for more tangible proof of Teti's end. In the 19th century, Gaston Maspero and other explorers uncovered fragments of burial equipment and inscriptions in his pyramid. The pyramid texts within emphasize protection against enemies and eternal survival, standard fare for royal burials, perhaps, but their tone has led some to wonder whether Teti feared betrayal in life as well as in death. Were these words merely religious convention or a reflection of the king's own anxieties? Modern scholars have debated the assassination claim for decades. Some dismiss it as myth, arguing that the lack of direct evidence, such as records from Teti's own time explicitly mentioning foul play, weakens the case. They suggest he may have died of natural causes, and that later tales of murder were embellishments added by storytellers seeking to dramatize Egypt's past. Yet others point out that silence in official records might be precisely what we should expect if a palace coup took place. Ancient Egyptians were adept at rewriting history to suit political needs. Beyond the academic debates lie more speculative ideas. Could Teti's death have been linked to religious upheaval? The period saw rising tensions between traditional solar cults and other emerging priestly powers. Some fringe theories even suggest that secret factions within the priesthood, perhaps those with esoteric knowledge of rituals and cosmic order, may have orchestrated his removal to maintain their influence. While such notions lack hard evidence, they underscore how little we truly know of the forces shaping this pivotal era. Standing today among the ruins of Teti's pyramid, one cannot help but feel a sense of incompleteness. The desert wind sweeps through the broken corridors, carrying with it the faint scent of dust and age-old secrets. The hieroglyphs on the walls, though eroded, still speak of eternity and divine kingship. Yet they remain silent on the circumstances of the king's demise. Was Teti a victim of treachery within his own household? Did his guards, sworn to protect him, turn assassins under the cover of night? Or did he simply succumb to time, his death later transformed into legend by those seeking to explain the sudden shifts in power? The sands of Saqqara have buried the truth for over 4,000 years, and each grain seems to whisper a different story. Perhaps in some yet unexcavated chamber, a clue lies waiting. A hidden papyrus, a sealed cache of relics, or even the missing fragments of Teti's remains. Until then, we are left with a mystery as enduring as the stone monuments themselves. In the twilight of Egypt's old kingdom, who truly killed its king, or was he killed at all? The cliffs of Amarna rise stark and silent against the pale desert sky, their rugged faces carved by centuries of relentless wind. Nestled among them lies a royal tomb, hewn deep into the limestone, a burial site that once held members of Egypt's most enigmatic royal family. Inside its shadowed corridors, faded reliefs and broken fragments of history whisper of devotion, death, and a mystery that has puzzled scholars for generations. It is here, within these walls, that we find the strange and haunting story of Meketaten, the daughter of Pharaoh Akhenaten. Meketaten was one of 6 daughters born to Akhenaten and his queen Nefertiti during a time when Egypt was undergoing one of the most radical transformations in its long history. Her father had abandoned the ancient gods of Egypt, closing their temples and elevating the worship of a single deity, the Aten, the sun disk, to supremacy. He had moved the royal court to a brand new city, Akhenaten, known today as Amarna, and reshaped not only the state's religion but also its art and culture. Amidst this sweeping revolution, Meketaten grew up in the dazzling yet isolated world of the Amarna court, depicted in frescoes as a cherished princess, often shown at her father's side in scenes of domestic tenderness rarely seen in Egyptian royal imagery. And then, suddenly, she was gone. Her life, like so much of the Amarna period, is veiled in obscurity. There are no surviving records of her marriage, no clear mention of her beyond her teenage years. What we have instead are the cryptic remains of her burial, deep within the royal tomb at Amarna. Reliefs on the tomb walls depict a scene unlike any other in Egyptian royal mortuary tradition. A lifeless young woman lying on a bed, surrounded by mourners, including Akhenaten himself, bent in sorrow. Nearby, a nurse cradles a baby. What does this scene represent? Scholars have debated its meaning for over a century. The prevailing interpretation suggests that Meketaten died in childbirth, possibly around the age of 15 or 16, and that the infant was her child, perhaps fathered by an unknown consort. But if that is so, why does the child also appear to be dead in the depiction? And why is there no surviving mummy of Meketaten, no coffin, no grave goods clearly identified as hers? The tomb chamber where her death was memorialized shows signs that her remains were once placed there, but later removed. Was she reburied elsewhere? The questions multiply the closer one looks. One troubling theory, discussed quietly among some Egyptologists, suggests that the baby shown in the relief may have been her father's. The intimate and unconventional nature of the Amarna court, combined with evidence of radical departures from tradition in every aspect of life, has fueled speculation that the royal family's relationships may not have adhered to the norms we expect. Could Meketaten have been the victim of dynastic incest, dying as a result of a pregnancy that was as politically dangerous as it was tragic? Supporters of this theory point to the secrecy surrounding her death and the eventual near erasure of the Amarna period from later Egyptian history. But others caution that such interpretations rest on conjecture. The baby could just as easily represent a symbolic rebirth, a theological image of the deceased princess being reborn into the afterlife. And yet, the mystery deepens when we consider what happened to her remains. Excavations of the Amarna tomb in the early 20th century revealed no trace of Meketaten's body. Some believe that her father, upon abandoning Amarna near the end of his reign, ordered the remains of his loved ones moved to Thebes for reburial. Others argue that looters or political enemies desecrated the tomb after the fall of Akhenaten's religious experiment, erasing his legacy and that of his family wherever they could. Still others wonder if her burial was never completed in the first place, that the reliefs were meant to commemorate a death that could not be openly acknowledged, leaving her spirit to wander unanchored by a proper tomb. The wider context of her death adds another layer of intrigue. Around the time of Meketaten's disappearance from history, Egypt was struck by a mysterious epidemic. Archaeological evidence suggests that a plague, possibly smallpox or bubonic plague, swept through the region, claiming lives in Palestine, Syria, and Egypt alike. Could Meketaten have been a victim of this plague rather than childbirth? If so, why depict her death in such a singular, intimate way? And what of the infant? Was it a real child, a symbolic figure, or something else entirely? Standing in the dim light of the Amarna tomb today, the carved images still evoke a powerful sense of loss. The mourners' faces, though stylized, seem heavy with grief. The presence of Akhenaten, shown in anguish, is particularly striking. Rarely in Egyptian art do we see a pharaoh depicted in such human vulnerability. Was this genuine paternal sorrow, or was it also a carefully staged religious statement, reinforcing the king's role as the intermediary between life, death, and the Atene's eternal light? The story of Meketaten's burial remains one of the Amarna period's most compelling enigmas. It touches on themes of love, power, secrecy, and the human cost of revolution. Was she a beloved daughter who died tragically young? A pawn in a royal experiment that blurred the lines between devotion and control, or perhaps both? As the sun sets over the cliffs of Amarna, casting long shadows over the empty royal tomb, one cannot help but feel that the answers lie just beyond reach, buried in the silence of the desert. Somewhere, perhaps in an undiscovered tomb, perhaps in a forgotten papyrus, the truth of Meketaten's fate may still exist. Until then, her story lingers like a ghost on the walls of her father's abandoned city, a reminder that even in the heart of the ancient world's most documented civilization, some secrets remain stubbornly, hauntingly unsolved. What truths might those silent stones still hold? And if they could speak, What would they reveal about a young princess whose life ended too soon, and the royal world that tried and failed to bury her story forever? Deep in the Valley of the Kings, where the sun bleaches the limestone cliffs and the silence is broken only by the dry whisper of wind over sand, lies one of the most awe-inspiring and enigmatic monuments of ancient Egypt, the Tomb of Seti I. Known today as KV-17, it is a subterranean labyrinth of corridors and chambers carved deep into the heart of the Theban hills. Even after more than 3 millennia, its painted walls retain a vibrancy that defies time, its reliefs still alive with color and form. The scenes depict gods, rituals, and journeys through the underworld, a celestial map to eternity. Yet despite its grandeur, this tomb carries a question that has haunted archaeologists for generations. Why was it never finished? Seti I, who ruled Egypt around 1290 to 1279 BC, was one of the great pharaohs of the New Kingdom. A warrior king and an accomplished administrator, he restored stability to Egypt after years of turmoil. His tomb, fittingly, reflects the ambition of a ruler intent on leaving behind a legacy worthy of eternity. The structure stretches an astonishing 137 meters underground, making it one of the longest and most elaborately decorated tombs in the Valley of the Kings. Every chamber seems to have been designed not merely as a burial space, but as a cosmic statement, a journey from life to death, from earth to the divine. And yet, as one ventures deeper into KV-17, a strange pattern emerges. Beyond the exquisitely painted corridors, past the grand burial chamber with its star-strewn ceiling and alabaster sarcophagus, lies a set of unfinished tunnels. The chisel marks are abrupt, raw, as if the workmen simply laid down their tools one day and never returned. These tunnels extend downward, leading to an area that appears to have been intended for additional chambers, perhaps even more sacred spaces, but they end in rough rock, incomplete and silent. Why would such a magnificent tomb, commissioned by one of Egypt's most powerful kings, remain unfinished? The traditional explanation points to the sudden death of Seti I. Pharaohs often began their tombs at the start of their reigns, racing against the inevitability of death. When Seti I died, work may have ceased, leaving the task of preparing his burial to his son, Ramses II. This is a reasonable conclusion, supported by similar patterns in other royal tombs. Yet KV-17 is peculiar in its abruptness. The unfinished corridors were clearly not abandoned because they had become unnecessary. They were part of a larger, deliberate plan. What was this plan? And why was it abandoned so completely? Some Egyptologists believe that Seti's tomb was meant to contain a secret, a hidden chamber intended for a divine relic or an alternate burial location. Could these unfinished corridors have been designed as decoys, meant to confuse tomb robbers, or as access to a concealed chamber that has yet to be discovered? Modern scans of KV-17 have suggested anomalies beyond the known structure, voids in the bedrock that might indicate unexcavated spaces. If so, what might lie within? Others have speculated about more troubling possibilities. The reign of Seti I was a period of great restoration, but also one of intense political intrigue. Could his death have been more sudden than official records suggest? Could these unfinished sections have been halted due to a shift in power, a decision by his successors to conceal or alter his burial in response to threats, either political or spiritual? The Amarna period, with its heretical religious reforms, had ended only a few decades earlier, leaving scars on the Egyptian psyche. Did some lingering fear of divine retribution lead to an abrupt change in his burial plans? There are even more speculative ideas. Some fringe theorists argue that the tomb's unfinished nature reflects something extraordinary, a discovery or event that halted the work entirely. They point to the strange quality of the uncompleted corridors, which seem to slope deeper and deeper, as if seeking something below. Was Seti's tomb originally intended to connect to something far older, perhaps an underground structure predating even the New Kingdom? Geological studies of the Theban hills have revealed fissures and cavities that could hide prehistoric or early dynastic remains. Could the workers have stumbled upon something that caused them to stop? And then there is the matter of Seti's body itself. His mummy, now housed in the Cairo Museum, shows signs of having been moved in antiquity, reburied with other royal mummies to protect them from looters. Was his original burial in KV-17 disturbed not centuries later, but in his own time? Could the unfinished corridors relate to an attempt to create an alternative resting place, one we have yet to find? Standing in the burial chamber of KV-17 today, it is hard not to feel the weight of this enigma. The painted figures of gods like Osiris, Anubis, and Ra-Horakhti gaze solemnly from the walls, their silent stares seeming almost aware of the questions that linger. The ceiling above, painted deep blue and studded with golden stars, represents the night sky through which Seti's soul was meant to journey. Yet just beyond this celestial vision lies the rough, unpolished rock of incompletion, a jarring reminder that even in this most sacred of spaces, something was left undone. What stopped the work in Seti's tomb? Was it simply the inexorable approach of death, cutting short a grand project? Or does the silence of those unfinished tunnels conceal a story we have yet to uncover? Could the Valley of the Kings still hold secrets buried beyond the reach of our tools and theories, waiting to reveal a chapter of history that would rewrite what we know of ancient Egypt? As the desert sun dips behind the Theban hills and shadows lengthen across the valley, one cannot help but wonder, is KV-17 truly complete as we see it today? Or is it merely a doorway to mysteries that remain, even now, untouched by time? Beyond the bustling tourist sites of Giza and Saqqara lies a quieter, almost forgotten plateau. Here, the desert stretches in muted tones of gold and gray, interrupted only by the crumbling outlines of pyramids long abandoned. This is Abusir, a necropolis that once served as the final resting place for rulers of Egypt's 5th dynasty. Amidst the weathered ruins of once grand structures stands something even more peculiar, a pyramid that was never completed. It lies half buried in sand, its foundation blocks exposed like bones of a forgotten giant. Today, archaeologists refer to it simply as the unfinished pyramid of Djoser. But what story does this skeletal monument tell? At first glance, it might seem unremarkable, a rectangular base, layers of limestone barely rising above the desert floor, and scattered debris indicating a structure that never reached completion. Yet, when viewed closely, the unfinished pyramid presents a riddle that defies easy answers. This was not the work of careless builders or a forgotten experiment. It was an undertaking of royal ambition. The precision of the foundation stones, the layout aligned with the cardinal points, and the presence of carefully planned causeways suggest a project of immense significance. The prevailing theory among Egyptologists is that the pyramid was commissioned by a little-known pharaoh, possibly Smenkhkare, a ruler whose reign is believed to have been brief, perhaps no more than a few years in the mid-25th century BC. His name appears only sparingly in king lists, and physical evidence of his reign is elusive. If this was indeed his monument, it might explain why it was never completed. Death could have intervened before the pyramid could rise beyond its initial stages, leaving his successors to prioritize their own projects rather than finish his. But as with many mysteries in ancient Egypt, the evidence leaves room for far more questions than answers. Why begin a project of such scale only to abandon it almost immediately? If Smenkhkare's reign was truly short, why do some inscriptions suggest he may have ruled long enough to commission significant works elsewhere? Could political upheaval have halted the construction? The 5th dynasty, though generally seen as a time of stability, was also marked by shifting religious priorities, most notably the increasing importance of the solar cult centered at Heliopolis. Was this pyramid abandoned because its purpose no longer aligned with emerging religious ideology? Some researchers point to the unusual design of the Abusir pyramid as a clue. Unlike the grand, towering structures of Giza, this pyramid appears to have been planned with a much lower slope, giving it a squat appearance, even if completed. Could this reflect an experimental phase in pyramid construction? Perhaps a transitional form leading toward later, more elaborate designs? If so, why abandon such an experiment rather than refine it? The intrigue deepens when one considers the broader context of Abusir itself. This necropolis contains several other pyramids, including those of Sahur and Neferneferuaten, each accompanied by richly decorated temples filled with scenes of daily life, tribute, and cosmic order. These temples emphasize the divine role of the king as a mediator between gods and men. Was the unfinished pyramid meant to continue this tradition? Or was it intended for something different entirely? Fringe theories have inevitably emerged, as they often do in places where evidence is scarce and silence endures for millennia. Some suggest that the unfinished pyramid was not abandoned due to royal death or political change, but because the builders encountered something beneath the sands, something that caused them to halt their work. The plateau of Abusir, like much of the Memphite necropolis, overlays layers of earlier activity, some predating the pyramids themselves. Could the workers have stumbled upon an older sacred site? Or perhaps something they deemed too dangerous or too sacred to disturb? Others wonder if the unfinished state of the pyramid was intentional. Could it have served as a symbolic structure rather than a true tomb? A monument to a king who ruled briefly but wished to be remembered as one who began a legacy, even if others were left to complete it? Such ideas remain speculative, but they highlight the absence of definitive evidence, a silence that invites interpretation. Even in modern times, the Abusir Plateau continues to yield surprises. Excavations have uncovered papyrus archives detailing temple administration, labor organization, and royal decrees, glimpses into the lives of those who built and maintained these sacred spaces. Yet none of these texts directly mention the unfinished pyramid. It remains a blank space in the historical record, a project that began with purpose but ended in obscurity. Standing at the site today, with the desert wind sweeping across its exposed stones, it is easy to feel the weight of that obscurity. The unfinished pyramid lies open to the sky, its foundation blocks warmed by the relentless sun, its silence unbroken for over 4,000 years. It is as if time itself has conspired to hide its true story, leaving only the faintest traces for us to ponder. Why was it left incomplete? Was it merely the casualty of a king's untimely death? Or does its abandonment hint at deeper currents in Egypt's history, currents of politics, religion, or perhaps events that have left no written trace? Could future excavations beneath the sands of Abusir reveal something that changes our understanding of this place entirely? As dusk settles over the plateau and the pyramids of Abusir cast long shadows toward the Nile, one cannot help but wonder, what dreams, what ambitions, and what secrets lie buried here, waiting to be uncovered by those willing to listen to the whispers of stone and sand? Beneath the echoing halls of Cairo's Egyptian Museum, among the hushed reverence of countless sarcophagi, lies a glass case that often stops visitors in their tracks. Inside rests a body thousands of years old, its skin darkened and leathery by time, its limbs stiffened by millennia of preservation. But what captures every eye is not the grandeur of its wrappings or the opulence of its burial. It is the face. Mouth agape, lips drawn back in a permanent rictus, the expression is one of agony so raw, so human, that it transcends the centuries. This is the so-called Screaming Mummy, a mystery that continues to unsettle scholars and casual observers alike. The body was first unearthed in 1886 in the Deir el-Bahari cache, a secret tomb complex in Thebes where priests of the 21st dynasty had reburied royal mummies to protect them from tomb robbers. Surrounded by the remains of pharaohs such as Ramses II and Seti I, the Screaming Mummy was an anomaly. Unlike the others, who were carefully embalmed and honored, this individual's body was hastily prepared. His skin bore no signs of the traditional resins, his limbs were bound tightly, and his mouth, wide open, seemed locked in an eternal scream. Why was this man buried in such a state among kings, yet treated with what seemed like deliberate indignity? Modern analysis has revealed more clues, but with each discovery, the mystery deepens. The mummy, catalogued as Unknown Man E, was a young man, likely in his 20s or early 30s. His body shows no obvious signs of violence, no blade wounds, no blunt force trauma. Yet CT scans have hinted at the possibility of poisoning. Was he executed? If so, why grant him a resting place among royalty at all? The most popular theory connects Unknown Man E to one of the most dramatic events in Egyptian history, the so-called Harem Conspiracy against Pharaoh Ramses III in the 12th century BC. Ancient papyri tell of a plot led by one of the king's secondary wives to murder him and place her son, Pentuer, on the throne. The plot was uncovered and the conspirators were executed, many by suicide under duress. Could this mummy be Pentuer himself? There are reasons to think so. DNA analysis in recent years has suggested a familial link between Unknown Man E and Ramses III, possibly indicating a father-son relationship. The screaming expression might be explained by the possibility of poisoning, specifically, a toxin causing muscular contraction even in death. The binding of his body, without the honor of full embalming, could signify punishment, a royal burial, but one intentionally stripped of dignity. Some scholars believe this was a final act of condemnation, acknowledging his royal blood, but eternally branding him as a traitor. But there are problems with this neat resolution. The papyri describing the harem conspiracy never mention what was done with Pentuer's body. Why risk interring a traitor near the most sacred of royal remains? And if the goal was dishonor, why preserve him at all, instead of leaving his body to decay? Could there have been another motive entirely? Some researchers have suggested that the open mouth, so haunting to modern viewers, may not signify a scream at all. In some cases, mouths remain open in death simply due to gravity or lack of preparation. Yet, in this case, the jaw appears unnaturally strained, as if pried wide. Was this part of a ritual? Here we drift into more speculative terrain. In ancient Egyptian belief, the mouth held profound significance. It was the portal through which life and the soul entered and left the body. Priests performed the opening of the mouth ceremony on the deceased to restore their senses in the afterlife. Could this mummy's grotesquely open mouth represent a perverse inversion of that ritual? Was it meant to deny him eternal peace, to trap his spirit, leaving him forever voiceless, forever in torment? And what of the larger context? Deir el-Bahari was not just a burial site. It was a hiding place. The 21st dynasty priests gathered royal mummies there to save them from desecration. Did they include Unknown Man E out of obligation, forced by some long-forgotten decree? Or did they fear his restless spirit, choosing to bury him among kings in hopes their presence would subdue him? Fringe theories go further still. Some have suggested the mummy's condition might indicate a ritual sacrifice, an attempt to appease a god or seal away a curse. Others whisper of ancient plagues, poisons that killed swiftly and horribly, leaving bodies frozen in contorted death. Could Unknown Man E have been one of many victims, chosen as a warning? Standing before the glass case, it is difficult not to feel an uncanny connection to this long-dead man. Unlike the serene faces of other mummies, his expression bridges time, speaking of pain, fear, and something unresolved. He does not look like a figure from a distant myth. He looks like someone who suffered, someone who still has something to say. And perhaps that is why the screaming mummy continues to fascinate. Is he truly Pentaur, the failed prince who conspired against his father? Or is he an unknown figure, his story lost to the sands, his silent cry a testament to forgotten injustice? As the museum lights dim in the evening and visitors depart, the halls grow quiet. Yet behind that glass, the mouth of unknown man E remains open, as if in protest or warning. What secrets died with him? And what would he tell us, if only that eternal scream could finally be heard? Beneath the relentless Egyptian sun, the plateau of Giza rises from the desert like an eternal sentinel of stone. The pyramids stand as monuments to ambition and engineering, their massive forms carved into the memory of civilization itself. Among them towers the Pyramid of Khafra, its sides still partly clad in ancient casing stones, gleaming faintly in the midday light. Yet as your eyes travel upward toward its apex, a question forms, a void, a mystery. The tip of the pyramid, once capped by a gleaming pyramidion of polished stone or perhaps even electrum, is gone. It has been gone for centuries. And with its disappearance, a part of Khafra's grand design, a part of Egypt's story, has vanished as well. The pyramidion, the sacred capstone, was the final touch on these vast monuments. In ancient Egypt, it symbolized the Benben stone, the mythical mound that emerged from the primordial waters at the dawn of creation, on which the first rays of the sun struck to bring forth life. For Khafra, builder of the second-largest pyramid at Giza and ruler of Egypt during the 4th dynasty, the pyramidion would have been more than decorative. It was spiritual, connecting his tomb to the heavens, to Ra, the sun god, ensuring his eternal rebirth in the afterlife. To lose such a sacred element seems inconceivable, and yet, when we look today, Khafra's summit is bare. How could such a significant piece vanish? Mainstream explanations point to the erosion of time and the exploitation of Egypt's monuments during later centuries. Many ancient pyramids were stripped of their casing stones during the Roman and Islamic periods, their polished limestone repurposed to build Cairo's mosques and palaces. The pyramidion, perched at the very top, would have been a tempting prize, its fine craftsmanship and possible precious coating irresistible to looters. But here lies the puzzle. While most pyramidions from other sites have at least left fragments behind, not a single trace of Khafra's has ever been definitively identified. Was it destroyed completely? Or could it have been taken far from Giza, perhaps spirited away in antiquity? There are tantalizing clues, though none conclusive. In the ruins of ancient Heliopolis, the city of the sun god Ra, a strange stone fragment was found in the 19th century, shaped like the upper tip of a pyramid, carved with faded inscriptions invoking solar deities. Some have speculated this might have been Khafra's missing crown, removed in a religious reappropriation long ago. But without definitive proof, the theory remains as elusive as the desert wind. Others look beyond Egypt's borders for answers. Legends in parts of ancient Palestine speak of a stone of light brought from the land of the Nile, placed atop a temple to channel the favor of the gods. Is this no more than myth? Or could Khafra's capstone have been among the spoils of empire, carried off by invaders or traded in secret? Still, there is another layer to the enigma, one not of theft, but of intention. Some Egyptologists suggest the pyramidion may have been deliberately removed, possibly during a political or religious upheaval. Khafra ruled during a period when the cult of the sun was rising to prominence, laying the foundations for the later solar-centric reigns of kings like Akhenaten. Could his successors have seen his pyramidion, with its symbols of divine kingship, as a threat or a relic of an older order they wished to erase? Then there are the more unconventional theories. To some fringe researchers, the missing tip suggests an ancient technology lost to time. They point to the precise alignment of Khafra's pyramid to cardinal points, its geometric perfection, and wonder, was the pyramidion part of a larger mechanism? Could it have been designed to focus energy, to serve as a beacon, a calendar, or even something far stranger? These ideas often stretch beyond the evidence, yet they persist, driven by the human tendency to find meaning in the unknown. And what of the pyramid itself, standing incomplete without its crown? When you stand at its base and gaze upward, the absence feels almost intentional. The apex ends abruptly, as though waiting for something to return. Could this void be symbolic, a deliberate design choice? Some argue that in leaving the capstone absent, or removing it later, the pyramid becomes not a finished monument, but a bridge between worlds, eternally open to the sky. Archaeological excavations at Giza continue, and with each new discovery, the sands yield hints of forgotten practices and long-lost treasures. Yet, despite over a century of exploration, no definitive evidence of Khafra's pyramidion has emerged. Could it still lie buried beneath the plateau, hidden in a collapsed chamber? Could it rest, unrecognized, in a museum storeroom somewhere in the world? Or has it been destroyed forever, leaving only speculation in its place? As twilight falls over Giza, the pyramids take on a different character. Their sharp lines soften, their shadows stretch, and the desert cools to a deep, quiet stillness. Khafra's pyramid looms against the darkening sky, its summit sharp, but incomplete. The stars emerge, ancient watchers over an even more ancient land. Did they once reflect off a shining capstone here, casting its light across the plateau as a signal of kingship eternal? We may never know. And perhaps that is why this absence resonates so deeply. The missing pyramidion is more than a lost stone. It is a symbol of the countless secrets still locked within Egypt's monuments. What else lies hidden in the sands, waiting for rediscovery? What truths, long buried, could change our understanding of one of history's greatest civilizations? The desert whispers no answers. It holds its silence, just as it has for thousands of years, leaving us to stand in the shadow of greatness and wonder what once crowned it. Deep within the Valley of the Kings, where jagged cliffs rise like sentinels over the desert floor, a solitary tomb lies half forgotten. The entrance to KV-23, the final resting place of Pharaoh I, is unassuming compared to the grandeur of neighboring royal tombs. A narrow corridor leads downward, walls adorned with fading images of gods and rituals meant to guide the deceased to the afterlife. The air here is dry, still, and heavy with the scent of dust and antiquity. And yet, within this quiet chamber, a profound mystery lingers, one of absence, of something once magnificent that has seemingly vanished without a trace. Pharaoh I, who ruled Egypt at the twilight of the 18th dynasty around 1323 BC, remains a shadowy figure in history. He ascended to the throne in the turbulent years following the reign of Tutankhamun, a period marked by political intrigue and religious upheaval. I, once a high-ranking courtier and possibly the Grand Vizier, crowned himself king in the aftermath of a dynasty struggling to regain its footing after the Amarna period's radical monotheistic revolution. He took Tutankhamun's widow, Akhenaten, as his queen, though some say it was a forced union, and presided over a brief reign that ended as mysteriously as it began. When his tomb was discovered in 1816 by Giovanni Belzoni, expectations ran high. This was, after all, the burial of a pharaoh. Yet, what lay inside was puzzlingly sparse. Fragments of funerary equipment, a few poorly made wooden objects, and wall decorations that seemed rushed and unfinished. The grandeur expected of a king's afterlife had been stripped away. There were no golden treasures like those found in Tutankhamun's tomb, no lavish shrines or jeweled artifacts to proclaim his divine status in death. Even his sarcophagus had been desecrated, its lid broken, its interior defaced. Why? The mainstream explanation attributes the emptiness of Oi's tomb to the rampant tomb robberies that plagued the Valley of the Kings in antiquity. During times of political instability, looters often plundered royal burials for their wealth, leaving behind little more than bare walls and broken fragments. Perhaps Oi's tomb simply fell victim to this age-old practice. But if so, why does the looting seem so thorough, so absolute? Other robbed tombs have left behind traces, scattered jewelry, damaged but identifiable artifacts, personal items overlooked by thieves in haste. KV-23, by contrast, feels intentionally emptied, as though its contents were systematically removed. Some historians propose a more calculated motive: erasure. Ai's rise to power has long been viewed with suspicion. Did he orchestrate Tutankhamun's death to seize the throne? Was his marriage to Ankhesenamun an act of political opportunism? If so, it's possible that later rulers, seeking to cleanse his memory from history, stripped his tomb deliberately. His successor, Horemheb, who positioned himself as a restorer of order and tradition, may have had every reason to obliterate Ai's legacy. Indeed, Horemheb systematically erased the names of predecessors associated with the Amarna period, chiseling them from monuments and replacing them with his own. Could Ai's missing treasures be part of this deliberate rewriting of history? There are also whispers, quiet, speculative, of treasures that might have found their way elsewhere. Some scholars suggest that Ai's burial goods may not have been lost, but repurposed. Artifacts bearing his name could have been stripped, reinscribed, and buried with later kings. In the tomb of Tutankhamun, for instance, certain objects bear signs of reuse, as if they were originally intended for someone else. Could some of those shimmering relics we associate with Tutankhamun have once belonged to Ai? And then there are the more tantalizing, less conventional theories. A few researchers point to the strange absence of Ai's treasures as evidence of a secret removal, not by ancient robbers, but by much later hands. The early 19th century, when Belzoni made his discovery, was a time when Egyptian antiquities were being taken in staggering quantities to private collections in European museums. Could Ai's artifacts have been spirited away long before the tomb was formally documented? Are they locked away in forgotten archives, mislabeled, or hidden in the basements of institutions that have long since forgotten their origin? The very landscape of the Valley of the Kings adds another layer to the mystery. Beneath its dusty surface lie tunnels and undiscovered chambers, some still unexplored. Could Ai's real burial treasure have been concealed in a hidden annex, separated from the main tomb to protect it from looters? Or might KV-23 itself be only a decoy, a symbolic resting place, while his true interment remains undiscovered elsewhere? Standing in Ai's tomb today, one cannot help but feel the weight of absence. The walls, decorated with scenes of the afterlife, show the pharaoh embraced by gods. Yet there is a hollowness here, as if the images themselves mourn what is missing. The silence is almost accusatory. What happened to the riches that should have honored this man in death? Were they stolen in greed, erased in vengeance, or hidden in secrecy? Outside, the sun burns high over the valley, its light unyielding on the barren cliffs. Yet beneath this brilliance, the sands still guard their secrets. Each year, new discoveries in Egypt reshape what we think we know of its past. Could one of those future finds restore Ai's lost legacy? Might a sealed chamber, still waiting to be opened, hold the artifacts that once adorned his burial? For now, the mystery remains: an empty tomb, a forgotten king, and treasures that may yet lie just beyond our reach. And as we leave KV-23 behind, one cannot help but wonder, in a land that has given up so many of its secrets, what else still waits unseen beneath the desert's timeless veil? Amid the quiet ruins of Djoser, south of Cairo, the sand drifts like a restless tide, shifting over millennia-old stones. The landscape is stark, almost alien, with the bent silhouettes of pyramids in the distance and the distant hum of the desert wind. Here, fragments of a once great civilization lie scattered across the ground, eroded by time yet still defiant. And among these relics stands, or rather, once stood, one of ancient Egypt's most enigmatic monuments, a statue of Pharaoh Senusret III, the powerful ruler of the 12th dynasty, carved from dark granite, his features bold, commanding, and now eerily incomplete. Today, the statue exists as a torso, its body upright, its broad chest etched with hieroglyphs of royal might, but the head, the very essence of identity, has vanished. Not cleanly removed, not delicately detached, but violently broken away, leaving a jagged surface where once a face gazed upon the world. Why? Senusret III, who reigned around 1878-1839 BC, was no ordinary king. He was one of the most formidable rulers of Egypt's Middle Kingdom, celebrated as a warrior king who expanded Egypt's borders, particularly into Nubia, and strengthened central authority at home. He built massive fortresses, restructured administration, and commissioned statues of himself unlike any seen before. Portraits with heavy-lidded eyes, lined faces, and a stern, almost weary expression. These were not the idealized, youthful images of earlier pharaohs. They were deliberately human, showing a king burdened by responsibility, perhaps projecting a message of resolve and vigilance in troubled times. So why is one of his most significant statues headless? The obvious explanation is destruction by natural forces or simple vandalism over the centuries. Earthquakes, looting, and the relentless passage of time have all taken their toll on Egypt's monuments. Many statues have been damaged or toppled, their pieces scattered or lost to history. Perhaps this was merely another casualty. But as scholars have examined the remains, questions arise. The break at the neck appears deliberate, not the random fracture of an accidental collapse. Tool marks suggest an intentional act. Moreover, the head itself has never been found, despite extensive excavations in the area. Where did it go? Some historians point to the political climate of later dynasties. It was not uncommon in ancient Egypt for rulers to erase the images of their predecessors in an attempt to rewrite history. Faces on statues were defaced, names chiseled from monuments, entire legacies wiped away. Could Senusret III have fallen victim to such a campaign of damnatio memoriae? There is no direct evidence of his name being erased elsewhere, yet the absence of his statue's head, a potent symbol of authority, feels symbolic, almost intentional. Others consider the possibility of ritual defacement. In Egyptian belief, statues were more than art. They were vessels for the ka, the life force of the person depicted. To destroy the head of a statue was to deny it life, to render it powerless. Was this statue deliberately killed? If so, by whom, and why? Then there is the curious timing of the statue's presumed destruction. Some theories link it to the Hyksos period, centuries after Senusret's reign, when foreign rulers took control of northern Egypt. The Hyksos left a complex legacy, sometimes vilified by later Egyptians as desecrators of sacred sites. Did they, in an act of conquest and domination, target symbols of Egyptian might like this statue? Or was the act committed by Egyptians themselves during a time of internal strife, when old dynasties were overthrown and new powers sought to obliterate the past? More speculative theories take us further afield. Some researchers note that Senusret III's reign coincided with a period of increased contact with neighboring lands, from Nubia in the south to the Levantine coast of Palestine. Was the removal of his head tied to conflicts beyond Egypt's borders? Could it have been taken as a war trophy, transported far from the Nile, and perhaps lying buried still in some unexcavated site beyond Egypt's sands? And then there are those who see the headless statue not as a symbol of destruction, but as a marker of concealment. What if the head was removed intentionally by those who revered the king, to safeguard it from looters or desecrators? Could it be hidden in a yet undiscovered cache, like the remarkable royal statues found at Tanis or the secret hoards of artifacts occasionally unearthed in temple precincts? Standing before the torso today, one cannot help but feel a strange intimacy with the mystery. The granite chest, still broad and unyielding after nearly 4,000 years, seems to speak silently of endurance. And yet, the missing face leaves a void, a silence that invites questions more than it offers answers. Who was this man in truth? A relentless conqueror, a wise administrator, a deeply burdened ruler? Did he foresee that his image would one day be mutilated, his likeness scattered, his legacy debated across the millennia? The sun dips low over Djoser, painting the desert in gold and shadow. Around the site, the wind whispers through the ruins, carrying with it the secrets of a civilization that, for all its grandeur, remains tantalizingly incomplete. Perhaps one day the missing head of Senusret III will emerge from the sands, offering new insights into a king who sought to portray himself as both mortal and divine. Or perhaps it will remain hidden forever, a deliberate silence in the story of Egypt's past. And as we turn away from the headless statue, we cannot help but ask, is this absence merely an accident of history, or a message intentionally left for us to ponder by those who once wielded power in the land of the Nile? What else, still unseen, waits beneath the endless desert, waiting to challenge everything we think we know? Deep within the heart of the Saqqara necropolis, the air hangs heavy with the weight of millennia. The stone passages of the Pyramid of Unas are narrow, cool, and silent, save for the faint echo of footsteps against ancient limestone. Here, beneath layers of desert sand and time, lies one of Egypt's most extraordinary treasures. Walls covered, ceiling to floor, in thousands of hieroglyphs carved with immaculate precision. These are the pyramid texts, the oldest known religious writings in the world, dating back to the 24th century BC. Their symbols glow faintly in the light of a torch, a sea of birds, serpents, stars, and human figures frozen mid-gesture, whispering messages from an age beyond memory. What secrets do these texts hold? On the surface, the pyramid texts appear to be religious spells, ritual incantations meant to guide the deceased pharaoh safely into the afterlife. They speak of the king ascending to the heavens, of uniting with the gods, of sailing across the sky in the solar bark of Ra. Some lines instruct him to avoid serpents and malevolent spirits, others to open the gates of the sky and join the imperishable stars. To the ancient Egyptians, death was not an end but a transition, and these inscriptions were a roadmap for eternity. Yet as scholars have studied these texts, a deeper, more enigmatic layer has emerged. Certain passages defy easy translation, filled with cryptic imagery and unusual word choices. There are references to ladders of light, doors of iron, and secret names of gods, concepts that seem both symbolic and oddly technical. Are these purely metaphors for spiritual ascent, or do they encode something more? The traditional view holds that the pyramid texts are a compilation of oral traditions gathered over centuries, reflecting evolving religious beliefs of the Old Kingdom. But some researchers point out anomalies that complicate this picture. The language of the texts is unusually archaic, even for the time of Unas. Could this suggest that they preserved knowledge from an even earlier era, perhaps reaching back into Egypt's pre-dynastic past? Consider also the precision of their placement. The texts are not scattered randomly across the walls. They follow specific patterns. Certain spells placed at particular orientations, some aligned with celestial markers. Why were specific passages chosen for certain chambers? And why, in the Pyramid of Unas, do the texts end abruptly in some sections, as though something was deliberately left out or removed? Mainstream Egyptology explains these patterns as ritual design, consistent with the Egyptians' obsession with cosmic order, or Ma'at. The positioning of texts, they argue, reflects symbolic geography: the east for rebirth, the west for death, the ceiling for the sky, the floor for the earth. But others wonder if there is a more practical dimension hidden within this sacred order. Could these carvings encode astronomical knowledge, as some archaeoastronomers claim? Were they in part a star map, a celestial blueprint guiding the pharaoh not only spiritually but physically through the heavens as they understood them? A more controversial theory suggests the texts might contain fragments of a lost scientific tradition. Proponents note curious references to the opening of the stone and the sounding of the great roar, which some interpret as descriptions of mechanical processes or resonant energy. Is this merely poetic language, or an echo of forgotten technology now long buried? Skeptics dismiss such interpretations as modern fantasy imposed upon ancient spirituality. And yet, the enigma persists. Why do some phrases seem so unlike the rest of Egyptian literature, so strikingly different in tone and content? Equally puzzling is the question of transmission. The pyramid texts were reserved exclusively for the king. They were not publicly displayed, not carved in temples or shared among the people. Why such secrecy? Did the Egyptians believe these words were too powerful for ordinary mortals? Or were they guarding something else? Knowledge that, if misused, could be dangerous. The mystery only deepens when one looks beyond Egypt. Certain motifs in the pyramid texts, such as the idea of a celestial ladder or a divine boat journeying among the stars, appear in other ancient cultures. Similar imagery surfaces in Mesopotamian epics, in Canaanite myths, even in later traditions of Palestine. Did these ideas spread outward from Egypt, or were they fragments of a shared, older belief system, perhaps from a civilization long lost to history? Standing in the burial chamber of Unas, it is impossible not to feel the weight of these questions. The hieroglyphs shimmer under the beam of a flashlight, their lines as sharp as the day they were carved. Each sign feels deliberate, purposeful, as if placed not merely to honor a dead king, but to communicate something enduring, something essential. What was it? Were the pyramid texts simply prayers for the soul of a monarch? Or were they a repository of ancient wisdom, encoded in symbols that have yet to yield their full meaning? Did they carry, hidden within myth and metaphor, the memory of a people's origins, their understanding of the cosmos, perhaps even a message meant for future ages? As we leave the chamber, the door sealing behind us with a hollow thud, the darkness swallows the carvings once more. The desert above lies silent, concealing countless secrets in its sands. And we are left to wonder, how much of the pyramid texts have we truly understood? Or have we only scratched the surface of a mystery that still waits, patient and unbroken, in the stone halls of Egypt's oldest pyramids? What if one day we find that these ancient words were never merely about death, but about life, knowledge, and powers we have yet to rediscover?